Chapter 536 First. From the bottom. 3-1. This was his first time fighting against a demonic tunist. Even though the other party's soul depth was beneath his, it was equaled out by his low cultivation. Thus, he had no choice but to retaliate with all of his might. As such, he didn't have any spare energy to pay attention to his surroundings. As such, Zhongxian couldn't have expected that the ghastly paleface belonged to Elder Wu. He thought that someone was trying to assault him. Thus, executing the Heaven's Path spear art with all his might, the spear in his hands turned into a bright ray of light and flew toward the other party. On the opposite side, Elder Wu had just heaved a sigh of relief, and before he could react, he saw a spear whipping straight toward him. His eyes narrowed, but it was already too late to dodge. As such, he was struck in the chest and was sent flying out. Pada. He was smacked into the wall, forming a character on it. What the heck? No one could have expected that there would be such a twist at the end of the test. Their eyes popped out from their sockets, and their faces grew so scarlet that it seemed as though blood would seep out of it if one were to pinch it. That was Elder Wu, the only demonic tunist in the whole of Myriad Kingdom City, a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle expert who was widely feared by others. Yet, he was struck by a spear and crashed into a wall. Did it need to be so exaggerated? Elder Wu, why did you suddenly run up to me? I didn't do this on purpose. Hearing the shocked gasps from the crowd, Zhongxian finally recognized the other party. With a reddened face, he spoke sheepishly. Wasn't this a test of soul depth? Why did you suddenly run up to me then? I thought that you were up to no good. Cough cough. Coughing up 2 large mouthfuls of blood, Elder Wu finally recovered from his condition and struggled down from the wall. What the heck was this? The pavilion master told him that he just had to serve as the examiner for this test. He thought that it would be easy, so he immediately agreed to it. Who knew that this would almost cause his death? The other party's strikes on the formation plate were aimed at the weaknesses of the demonic tune of psychosis. If he didn't retaliate, his soul would surely be severely damaged. Left with no other option, he could only slowly advance to heighten the might of his offense. In the end, the demonic tune that even the pavilion master feared seemed to be completely ineffective on the other party. The other party didn't even seem to notice the increasing intensity of the tune. The freaking hell. To be able to be impervious to a demonic tune. What kind of monster did Su Fan and Ling Yuheng bring here? The great frustration he was suffering from was making him doubt the purpose of life in itself. Forget it, I don't blame you. Even so, he knew that a clash between music could easily spiral out of control. The other party didn't intend this either. Thus, after recuperating for a short moment, Elder Wu waved his hands nonchalantly. Even though he felt indignant, as an elder, he couldn't possibly pick a bone with a 2-star master teacher. Besides, given how he was reduced to such a state even when he wasn't picking a bone, if he were to really try to exact vengeance, it would be hard to tell whether he could return alive. Since that was the case, he might as well drop the matter. Check the formation plate. Fetching the formation plate from the wall, he passed it over to the invigilating master teacher. Yes. Grabbing the formation plate, he began counting the strokes on it and announced, a total of 431 strokes. Every single stroke is of equal depth and width. 431 strokes? Isn't that result the same as Ruo Huan Gongzi? That seems to be so. He managed to leave behind so many marks with a spear. I thought that he was just randomly knocking the spear on the formation plate, to think that he managed to inscribe so many strokes. That's impressive. Since the both of them have the same number of strokes, who will be the second place? Or will it be shared between the two of them? Hearing the results, the crowd flew into an uproar. They'd thought that given how Zhongxian seemed to be randomly striking on the formation plate without any clear order, the strokes on the formation plate would surely be chaotic and messy, or perhaps, he might not have even left a single stroke behind at all. Yet, never could they have expected that the latter would share the same result as Ruo Huan Gongzi, since the both of them had the same result. How would the ranking be decided? Were they going to be placed second together? He also carved 431 strokes. Not expecting Zhongxian to achieve such results, Ruo Huan Gongzi's complexion darkened. With a carving knife in hand, he toiled through so much hardship before he could inscribe so many strokes. On the other hand, the other party was equipped with a spear and his movements were completely erratic, not to mention, he was knocking on the plate to retaliate against Elder Wu. Yet, the other party still achieved a result equivalent to his. Was this for real? Looks like we've been underestimating him. That fellow isn't as simple as he looks. Ruo Huangong's eyebrows shot up. When he heard that the other party was only a 2-star master teacher, honestly speaking, he didn't even view the other party as an opponent. But from the looks of it now, it was the gravest mistake he could make. To use a spear to inscribe on a formation plate from several meters away. He could never have imagined this to be possible. In fact, even with seeing it with his own eyes, he still found it incredulous. However, do you think that achieving a draw with me will be that easy? Ruo Huangong's lips curled up to form a cold sneer. So what if the other party managed to inscribe the same number of strokes as him? He still had a trump card in hand. A countryside bumpkin like the other party could never hope to match up to him. Impressive. Feng Morsheng was also awed. Despite using a carving knife, he only carved one more stroke than the other party. As expected of someone heavily recommended by the elders. Fearsome indeed. He thought that he was the dark horse for this selection round, but compared to the other party, he felt like he could only be considered as a dark donkey. Amidst the crowd's discussion, 6 formation plates were placed side by side on a table. Each of them was filled with inscriptions, reflecting their prior work and accomplishment. Pavilion Master, please evaluate the formation plate. The invigilating master teacher clasped his fist and bowed to Pavilion Master Kang. UN. Nodding his head, Pavilion Master Kang, Elder Su, and a few other elders stepped forward and browsed through the formation plates. The calculation before is accurate. Allow me to announce the results for the first round then. Scanning through the crowd, Pavilion Master Kang said, Feng Morsheng, with 432 strokes, is in first place. Jun Ruohuan and Zhong Xian, with 431 strokes each, are tied in second place. Fu Xiaochen, with 427 strokes, is in fourth place. Luo Shi, with 411 strokes, is in fifth place. Du Hu, with 407 strokes, is in sixth place. I didn't expect Feng Shi to really be in first place. That Zhong Shi is formidable as well. Probably no one thought that he could achieve a tie with Ruo Huangongzi. Indeed. I thought that his reputation supersedes his capability, but to think that it would be the opposite instead. Innumerous discussions broke out below. Everyone thought that Ruo Huangongzi and Fu Xiaochen would be standing at the top of the candidates. No one expected that 2 dark horses, Feng Morsheng and Zhong Xian, would appear all of the sudden. Alright, the first round is over. Let's proceed on to the second round. After declaring the results, Pavilion Master Kang was just about to proceed into the next round when a voice interrupted him. Pavilion Master, I think that there's a problem with my result. Everyone turned to the stage, only to see Ruo Huangongzi stepped forward with a faint smile on his face. Oh! Pavilion Master Kang turned to look at him. For the first round, Elder Wu said that we'll be judged on the progress in our inscription and the exquisiteness of our strokes. Ruo Huangongzi said. May I double-check if that's true? I did say those words. Elder Wu nodded his head. After resting for a moment, he had already recovered significantly. Just that, his face was still pale, and his spirit seemed to be a little withered. That's exactly what I mean. You all have checked the number of strokes, but you all forgot to check the exquisiteness of it. Ruo Huangongzi chuckled lightly. Exquisiteness of the strokes. Everyone was taken aback. Even Pavilion Master Kang couldn't help but frown. How in the world do we check that? Are we supposed to judge by how thin the candidate's strokes are? But that's a problem of the carving knife already. One's sole depth had nothing to do with it. Simple, I've carved more than just marks on the formation plate. Please take a look. Walking up to the formation plate, Ruo Huangongzi whipped out his carving knife and added several dozen more strokes. These strokes were very simple, they were mainly just connecting some of the isolated lines together. However, just by connecting these lines together, the messy strokes on the formation plate changed into something very different. Wang. A crisp chirp sounded, and a giant peony suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. Shrouded in spiritual energy, it slowly bloomed beautifully. It is a painting. Under that kind of condition, Ruo Huangongzi actually managed to carve a 5th-level painting on the formation plate. That explains why he's so confident despite the number of his strokes being lower than that of Fengshe. A 5th-level painting. That's a work that only a 3-star painter could produce. I've long heard that one of Ruo Huangongzi's supporting occupation is a painter. From the looks of it, that's indeed the case. Incredible. Everyone was astonished. Even Pavilion Master Kang didn't expect this turn of events. To be able to grant the flower spirit and create a 5th-level painting when one's mind was under the assault of the demonic tune of psychosis. Ruo Huangongzi's mental fortitude had reached an astonishing level. It was no wonder why he was so confident. Carving strokes on the formation plate was extremely elementary. Creating a painting under that condition, that was true capability. Under normal circumstances, it would already be difficult to create a 5th-level painting in 3 minutes. Not to mention, the other party had done it under the influence of the demonic tune of psychosis. His talent, capability, and mental fortitude were truly frightening. Good, good. Pavilion Master Kang's eyes lit up as he nodded his head in satisfaction. As painter wasn't one of his supporting occupations, he failed to see through the trick hidden in the formation plate. Even so, he understood the difficulty in creating a 5th-level painting under that condition. Ruo Huangongzi was his direct disciple. Seeing the other party's outstanding performance had filled him with pride and relief. The reason why I have less strokes isn't because I was unable to inscribe any more, but that to carve out a painting, I couldn't leave behind any more strokes than that. I hope that Pavilion Master can reconsider the judgment. Ruo Huangongzi spoke confidently. UN. Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head. His gaze swept across the elders. What do you all think? Even though he has carved a single stroke less, he has managed to create a painting. Clearly, Ruo Huangongzi's accomplishment is much greater here. To be able to create a 5th-level painting under the influence of the demonic tune of psychosis, his mental fortitude is indeed impressive. I also feel that Ruo Huangongzi should be in 1st place. Soon, most elders concurred that Jun Ruo Huan should be in the 1st place. No one questioned the decision, and even Feng Morsheng expressed his approval of the decision. Even though he had carved more strokes, it was clear that the other party's work was much more exquisite than his. Every single stroke the other party made had a purpose, whereas in comparison, his strokes were made randomly just for the purpose of clearing the test. Seeing that no one had any objections, Pavilion Master Kang announced, "Good. Since no one has any objection, I'll announce the revised results. Ruo Huan is in 1st place, Feng Morsheng in 2nd, Zhongshe 3rd, Fu Xiaochen 4th, Luoshi 5th, and Du Hu 6th. Ruo Huangongzi is indeed impressive. As expected of the most popular contender for the champion spot, he managed to get the 1st place in the 1st round easily. However, we'll have to wait to see whether he can maintain his lead." Everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Seeing that he had received the 1st place, Ruo Huangongzi chuckled delightfully. Turning to Zhongxian, his eyebrow shot up and he said, "Zhongshe, it seems like we aren't tied in the 2nd place anymore. You sure caused a huge ruckus just now, but so what? In the end, you still lost to me." Not expecting the other party to gloat even after getting the 1st place, Zhongxian shook his head helplessly. He turned his gaze to Pavilion Master Kang and said, "That as long as one's strokes are more exquisite, one's results will be better, right?" "Yes." Pavilion Master Kang was taken aback for a moment, but he soon nodded his head. "That is good." Following which, Zhongxian turned to his formation plate on the table, and with a darkened expression, he bellowed, "What are you sleeping around for? Hurry up and get to work." Wang. A crisp sound of spirit euphoria sounded in the air, and the formation plate which he had just inscribed whirred into action. Spiritual energy was frenziedly drawn from the surroundings, creating a massive vortex. Spirit euphoria. This is a sentient grade 4 spirit gathering formation plate? Elder Wu narrowed his eyes. As a 4-star formation master, he possessed a deep understanding of formations. As such, He knew how difficult it was to carve a formation plate. Even with his current strength, carving a grade 4 spirit-gathering formation would require at least a week. Yet, the other party, just by stabbing for 3 minutes with a spear, managed to inscribe one successfully. And what made it even shocking was that it was a sentient formation plate. This was way too shocking. On top of that, it is common understanding that a grade 3 blank formation plate could only harness a grade 3 formation. Yet, the other party managed to inscribe a grade 4 formation. How deep could his comprehension of formation have reached? At the very least, Elder Wu knew that he was no match for the other party. What was even more fearsome was that the other party did it while facing off with him. While blood was spurting out of his mouth, the other party was busy making a grade 4 sentient formation plate. Elder Wu felt so stifled that he could explode at any moment now. The inscribing of a formation plate is an extremely complex process. Every single stroke had to be carefully planned, and not a single mistake would be tolerated. To do so with a spear. In comparison, Ruo Huangongzi's 5th level painting is nothing at all. Indeed, there's a huge disparity between the two. Seeing the gathering of spiritual energy, everyone in the room fell silent. Their eyes widened as though they had seen a ghost. You. On the other hand, Ruo Huangongzi trembled so violently that he was about to go insane. He thought that he was already formidable to have created a painting. Yet, never in his dreams did he expect this fellow to inscribe a grade 4 formation. A grade 4 formation was already extremely difficult to inscribe even without the demonic tune of psychosis. Yet, this young fellow did it while leaving Elder Wu spurting blood. That was too unbelievable. More importantly, the formation plate was even sentient. Even though both his painting and the formation possessed spirit, the difference in the significance of the feats was like heaven and earth. Ruo Huangongzi thought that he would surely be ranked first this time. He didn't expect to be overthrown in the blink of an eye, and even stomped several times upon. Tears threatened to stream down his face. If only he knew earlier, he wouldn't have acted so smugly and say that he couldn't be tied with the other party in the second place. In the end, he was the one who ended up being in the second place instead. This face slap. Just as he was feeling stifled, the other party's voice sounded, "Can my formation be considered as exquisite?" Cough cough, it does. Pavilion Master Kang's face reddened. It was embarrassing how the other party had inscribed a formation and he didn't even notice it. More importantly, to have to change his judgment twice in a single round. What kind of monsters were involved in this selection round? In the first test, Zhong Shuo, being in first place, shall be awarded 6 points. Ruo Huan, in second place, will be awarded 5 points, so on and so forth. Knowing that it would only become more embarrassing if he were to delay any longer, he hurriedly announced the results. Seeing that there was no one objecting to them, he heaved a sigh of relief and continued, "All right, let's go on to the second test, the test of cultivation. In order to become a master teacher, one's cultivation realm is of utmost importance. While a master teacher's strength is mostly derived by their ability to discern and exploit the flaws of their enemies, their own cultivation mustn't be neglected. But of course, one's cultivation is closely related to the resources they have access to and the guidance of their teachers. As all of you come from different backgrounds, it's natural that you all will have different cultivation realm. As such, a normal battle will be unfair." Everyone nodded their heads. Taking Ruo Huangongzi for example, he came from the Jun clan, the dominant clan of the 4 great clans. On top of that, his teacher was Pavilion Master Kang. From the very start, he was already entitled to the best conditions possible. Not to mention, he was also older than most of the participants present, so it was only natural for him to be stronger than the others. On the other hand, people like Luo Shi and Du who came from backward kingdoms, so the resources they had for cultivation couldn't compare up to the rest. On top of that, they were also younger than the other candidates. It would be unfair to gauge them by having them battle one another. Thus, I've discussed with the other elders and we decided to have Elder Bai fight you with his cultivation suppressed to your respective levels. The more blows you can withstand in the fight against him, the stronger you will be deemed to be. Not only will this assess your comprehension of your current cultivation realm, it will also test your reflexes and decision-making skills in times of danger. This makes the test even more comprehensive, Pavilion Master Kang said. Fight with Elder Bai, who has suppressed his cultivation. Those who have joined the selection round are of differing cultivation levels. The test would be biased if we have them fight against one another. Fu Shi has already reached Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Pinnacle, whereas Zhong Shi is only at Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan Pinnacle. Even without having the two face one another, the result of the battle is clear. Indeed, having Elder Bai suppress his cultivation, and gauging the respective candidates by the number of blows they can last against the latter will indeed make the test fairer. As a 4-star master teacher, Elder Bai's comprehension of battle techniques is far superior to them. Even if he were to suppress his cultivation to be of equal level to them, it would be impossible for them to emerge victorious. By gauging the results based on the number of blows the candidates can withstand from Elder Bai, the candidates can avoid getting injured while accurately discerning their level of strength among their peers. That's a good idea, UN. Other than Pavilion Master Kang, nearly no one is able to defeat Elder Bai. On top of that, he's impartial. I have no qualms with the rules. Hearing the rules of the second round, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. The 6 participating master teachers of the selection round had differing cultivation levels, and thus, it would be impossible to have them spar with one another without compromising on fairness. Thus, having an elder suppress his cultivation to face off with them would become the ideal way to test the candidates. The suppression of cultivation would make the test more impartial as the duo would be of equal cultivation. On the other hand, the number of blows that the candidate could withstand was the best way to gauge the candidate's strength. This could be considered as the most impartial method possible already. Seeing the crowd agree to it, Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head in agreement. Turning to the elder seated not too far away, he said, "I'll be troubling you then. Don't worry about it." The elder stood up and walked up the stage. "Elder Bai Heng, don't worry. After suppressing my cultivation, I'll fight with all my might. I won't go easy on anyone, so you need not worry about the fairness of the test. How many blows you can withstand will depend on your capability, and I, Bai Heng, swear on my dignity as a master teacher that I won't side with anyone." Walking up, Elder Bai looked at the candidates seriously. Ruo Huangongzi and Fu Xiaochen hurriedly said, "We have trust in Elder Bai's impartiality." Elder Bai was a reputable elder in the Master Teacher Pavilion. Possessing a cultivation of Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Pinnacle, his true fighting prowess was second only to Pavilion Master Kang. On top of that, he had an upright personality, and he had even used his dignity as a master teacher to guarantee his impartiality on this matter. Since that was the case, it was impossible for him to go easy on anyone. Since there are no objections, you all should make preparations that you all deem fit. You're permitted to use weapons, or if you prefer, bare fists are fine too. In any case, use the battle techniques you are the most adept in to fight with Elder Bai. However, for the sake of fairness and secrecy, the fight will be conducted in a sealed chamber. The number of blows will be reflected by a unique formation on the wall, so it'll be impossible to falsify the results. Also, the details of the fight will be kept a secret as well, so you need not worry, Pavilion Master Kang said. After hearing the arrangements, the other master teachers nodded their heads. Every master teacher had their own ultimate technique that they didn't want anyone to know of. If they were to display it before a crowd, there was high possibility that the information might leak out. If so, their trump card would be known by their enemies and thus be rendered useless. Conducting the test in a sealed chamber could solve this issue. "I'll go in and wait for you all." Waving his hands casually, Elder Bai walked into a small room by the side of the hall. "All right, who wants to go first?" Seeing that Elder Bai was ready, Pavilion Master Kang turned to look at the 6 candidates before him. "I'll go first." Fu Xiaochen stepped forward. He was a potential contender for the champion seat, but in the first round, he was only in the 4th place. This made him extremely frustrated. In terms of soul depth, he might not be able to compare up to Feng Morshing and Ruo Huangongzi, but in terms of strength, he was confident that he was second to none. "UN, be careful." Pavilion Master Kang nodded in satisfaction. "Pavilion Master, thank you for your advice." Fu Xiaochen walked into the room. Wang. The moment he stepped into the room, The white wall beside the door immediately glowed and a number appeared. 1, 2, 3, 10. The number changed continuously, and it didn't take long for it to reach 10. It has begun. Even though Elder Bai has suppressed his cultivation, to be able to survive 10 blows from him, Fu Shi is quite incredible. Need that be said? Fu Shi is Elder Hai's student. He has already reached an incredible mastery in the Thousand Seas Punch. Even with Elder Bai's astounding fighting prowess, it'll take him at least 15 blows to defeat Fu Shi. Indeed. The Thousand Seas Punch launches blows relentlessly at one's enemies as though the ceaseless waves of the sea. It is truly a formidable battle technique. I wonder how many blows he can withstand. Seeing the numbers on the wall, everyone could tell that the fight had already begun, and both sides had already traded 10 blows. They couldn't help but clench their fists out of anxiety. Elder Bai's fighting prowess was formidable. Even if he had suppressed his cultivation, surviving 10 blows from him was already something one could brag about. After all, even if an expert suppressed his cultivation to the same level as a rookie, his comprehension of fighting in itself was not something that a rookie could compare up to. How could the rookie possibly achieve victory under such circumstances? Who? Amidst the shock gazes of the crowd, the leaping numbers finally came to a halt. 31. Following which, the tightly shut doors opened and Fu Xiaochen walked out. Even though his clothes were slightly unkempt, his eyes glowed in excitement. Only when experiencing it oneself would one understand how powerful Elder Bai was. Even though the latter had already suppressed his cultivation, Fu Shi still wasn't a match at all. If not for him dumping out all of his trump cards, it would have been difficult for him to even last 20 blows. With 31 blows, Fu Xiaochen was confident that he could at least get the first 2 places. Impressive. Ruo Huan Gongzi looked at the young man who had just left the chamber and his expression turned grim. He wasn't confident that he could survive so many blows from Elder Bai, and this put heavy pressure on him. Ruo Huan Gongzi, let me see how well you fare. Fu Xiaochen walked up to Ruo Huan Gongzi and said with curled up lips. Sure. Taking in a deep breath, Jun Ruo Huan gritted his teeth and walked into the chamber. Hoo. Soon, numbers started to appear on the white wall. How many blows do you think Ruo Huan Gongzi can withstand? I can't really tell. His fighting prowess is at the same level as Fu Shi. Since the latter is able to survive 31 blows, his result should be around that level as well. Let's just hope so. Seeing the number increasing continuously, everyone's face slowly grew graver. Jun Ruo Huan and Fu Xiaochen, as idols for many of the younger generation, were the 2 most popular contenders for the champion seat. Everyone was curious to know whose fighting prowess was greater. I think Fu Xiaochen should fare better than Jun Ruo Huan, Pavilion Master Kang suddenly said. Oh! Elder Su turned his attention over. Xiaochen has a calm disposition which makes him adept in defense. On the other hand, Ruo Huan, due to his prideful nature, only becomes more and more aggressive in the face of danger. Such attacks might work on others, but against Elder Bai it will prove to be a fatal flaw instead. Pavilion Master Kang analyzed. You're right. Su Shi and Ling Shi nodded their heads in agreement. It wasn't by chance that Jun Ruo Huan was known as the head of the 4 gentlemen. It was through his fists that he slowly beat that reputation out for himself. And it was precisely because of his strength that built onto his pride. Prideful people tended to be weaker in their defense. Usually, this wouldn't make much of a difference when facing off with those of similar cultivation realm, but against the experienced Elder Bai, Jun Ruo Huan's flaws would be exploited and amplified many folds. Who? While the duo was speaking, the light on the wall slowly faded, revealing 2 digits to the crowd 30. Just as Pavilion Master Kang guessed, Ruo Huan Gongzi's result was indeed beneath that of Fu Xiaochen. At 30 blows, he happened to lose to the latter by just a single blow. Just a single blow. Do you think that Ruo Huan Gongzi might have some trump card just like in the first round? Even though he has lost out to Fu Shi by a single blow, is it possible that he has won instead? How is that possible? This is a real spar. Every blow has to be created by one's own strength. A blow less means a blow less. There's no making up for it. That's true. Seeing that it was 30 blows, There were some who felt that Ruo Huangongzi might be able to make a turnaround like he did previously. But giving it some thought, it was indeed impossible to do so. After all, sparring was different from carving a formation plate. Every blow counted, there was no making up for it with anything. Jia. During the discussions, the door to the chamber opened and Ruo Huangongzi walked out with a bitter smile. He also didn't expect to lose to Fu Xiaochen by a single blow. Even so, there was nothing he could do. Even though Elder Bai had suppressed his cultivation, his offense was relentless as though the ceaseless waves. He had given it his all, but 30 blows were already his limit. Even though he lost, he had no regrets. Allow me to go next. Upon seeing Ruo Huangongzi exit, Feng Moshing took in a deep breath and walked into the chamber. A bright light shone, and numbers appeared on the white wall. Not too long later, Feng Moshing walked out with a pale face. The number was fixed at 28. Seeing his result, Fu Xiaochen and Ruo Huangongzi heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, their gazes turned to Zhongxian. After the three of them were done with the examination, the only one most likely to turn the situation around was this fellow. Even though they didn't know how the other party's fighting prowess was, given how he was able to leave Elder Wu in a wretched state through music itself, he was unlikely to be weak. But what that left them disappointed was that Zhongxian didn't seem to be in a rush to enter the chamber at all. Luo Shi and Du Hu went ahead of him, and what was surprising was that Du Hu, who had fared the worst in the previous round, actually managed to withstand 28 blows as well, thus achieving a result equaling Feng Moshing. On the other hand, Luo Shi, due to her physical weakness as a female, only managed to withstand 24 blows. It's Zhongshi's turn. Indeed. I wonder if he can become the dark horse just like how he did in the first round. I find that very unlikely. After all, as a transcendent mortal Wundan pinnacle, his battle experience is likely to be very lacking. He'll be at a huge disadvantage facing off with Elder Bai. That's true. Seeing Zhongxian walk into the chamber, the crowd whispered amongst themselves. In truth, the method of conducting the test wasn't as fair as it sounded. It was much easier for a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert to subdue a transcendent mortal 1-dan cultivator as compared to a transcendent mortal 3-dan cultivator even if he were to suppress his cultivation to their respective level. This was due to the difference in their battle experience. Take for example, while a professor might be able to do a university student's homework and a grade schooler's homework, it was clear that a grade schooler's homework would be much easier for him than a university student's homework. Zhongshi's cultivation was the lowest among all the candidates. It would surely be much easier for Elder Bai to deal with him than the other candidates. How many blows do you think he can withstand? Pavilion Master Kang turned to look at Su She. Su She hesitated for a moment before saying, "This. I'm not too sure." However, given Elder Bai's skills, even if he were to suppress his cultivation to transcendent mortal 1-dan pinnacle, he would still be able to kill a transcendent mortal 2-dan intermediate stage cultivator easily. I'm afraid Zhongshe probably won't be able to last for too long. He carried deep trust in Zhongxian, but Elder Bai wasn't someone ordinary either. His grasp of cultivation and battle techniques had reached an incredibly profound level. Even Su She would find it hard to match up to the other party, let alone Zhongshe. Indeed. Even though Zhongshe had managed to progress 3 cultivation realms in the past 20 days, his cultivation should still be unstable and his grasp over his strength should be lacking. My guess is that he'll lose within 10 blows, Pavilion Master Kang analyzed. Su She had said previously that Zhongshe had progressed from Zhongshe realm 20 days ago to transcendent mortal 1-dan pinnacle. Achieving breakthroughs so quickly, even if he was a celestial master teacher, it was inevitable for his cultivation to be slightly shaky. His estimate of 10 blows was already a positive one. I also think so, but Zhongshe has never been a person who could be dictated by common logic. It's hard to tell what will happen next. Lingshe interjected. While he agreed with Pavilion Master Kang's analysis under normal circumstances, it would be impossible for Zhongshe to withstand even 10 blows. He also knew that Zhongshe was a person who often broke expectations. As long as the result wasn't out, it would be hard to fathom a guess. Look, it's starting. They weren't the only ones who were anxious. Everyone in the hall was looking intently at the white wall beside the door, and soon, a number appeared on it. 1. Ah! Why isn't it increasing anymore? After seeing the number 1, everyone thought that it would continue increasing to a point before stopping altogether. But to their astonishment, the number seemed to be printed firmly there, not moving at all. Could it be that the formation is malfunctioning? That's impossible. The formation was set up by Elder Wu personally. Besides, it was fine when the other candidates were using it. How could it possibly spoil all of a sudden? Then, why is that number not moving at all? Could it be that? At that moment, everyone thought of the same possibility and disbelief filled their faces. He lost in a single move. Ruo Huangong's eyes lit up, and he clenched his fists tightly together in agitation. Even the austere Fu Xiaochen showed a rare expression of delight. The duo had been worried that this black horse would overthrow their records just like he did previously. No one expected him to lose in a single blow. But that was to be expected. How could a transcendent mortal One Dan lad possibly be able to withstand Elder Bai's ferocious assault? They had thought that this fellow might be their greatest obstacle to winning the selection round, but from the looks of it now, they were just overthinking things. The other party wasn't even a threat at all. Isn't this result too poor? With such strength, he still hopes to participate in the Master-Teacher tournament. Even though strength isn't the determining criteria, it is still of significant importance. Even Beauty Luo Shi is able to withstand 24 blows. To lose in a single blow. Isn't that way too fast? Indeed. So what if he has a powerful soul depth? Without sufficient strength, he would still be eliminated swiftly in the tournament. Upon understanding the situation, everyone began gossiping. In the first round, this fellow had astonished everyone with his unparalleled talents. Even Elder Wu nearly lost his sanity because of him. So, they thought that even if his result in the second round couldn't compare up to his first, he would still be able to fare decently. They never thought that the other party would do so poorly. Losing in a single blow. Even a normal cultivator should have been able to withstand at least several blows. This. Pavilion Master Kang, Su Shi, and Ling Shi stared at one another blankly. They had deduced that Zhongshe wouldn't be able to even withstand 10 blows, but to lose in a single blow, what the heck was this? Zhongshe sure likes to do the unexpected. I sure didn't expect this conclusion. Su Shi flashed a bitter smile as he spoke. This Zhongxian was always doing things that surpassed the imaginations of others. Just taking this as example, they had thought of all kinds of possibility, but one thing they didn't expect to see was for the latter to lose in a single blow. Alright, since the results are out, allow me to announce them. Shaking his head, Pavilion Master Kang scanned the surroundings and said, Fu Xiaochen, with a record of 31 blows, is in the first place. Ruo Huangongzi, withstanding a total of 30 blows, is in the second place. Feng Mosheng and Du Hu, with a total of 28 blows, are tied at third. Luo Shi, with a total of 24 blows, is in the fifth place. Last but not least, Zhongshe, withstanding just a total of 1 blow, is in the midst of announcing the results for the second round, Jia, the door suddenly opened. Turning his gaze over, Pavilion Master Kang suddenly saw something that left his eyes widened in shock, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "What the hell?" Chapter 537, Continuity of Spiritual Wisdom going back to 2 minutes ago. Upon entering the room, Zhongxian scanned his surroundings. The room wasn't exceptionally big. Upon entering, Zhongxian immediately saw a weapon rack. There were swords, sabers, spears, and many different kinds of weapons that a person could imagine of on it. Elder Bai stood at the very center of the room with an impassive expression. Take the weapon that you're the most adept at. Weapon? Zhongxian shook his head. It'll be hard not to hurt another using a weapon, so there's no need for it. The 3 weapons that he specialized in, sword, spear, and saber, had all reached the level of weapon intent. He didn't think that there was any need to go to such an extent just for a mere test. You. Elder Bai's face darkened. It's indeed easy to hurt another using weapon, but do you think that you can hurt me? His eyebrows shot up coldly. The other party was an arrogant brat. All right. Since you chose this of your own accord, don't blame me for not going easy on you. Not bothered about arguing with the other party, Elder Bai suppressed his cultivation of transcendent mortal 4 Dan pinnacle to just 1 Dan pinnacle. I've suppressed my cultivation to your level already. Make your move. Elder Bai stretched his arm and beckoned with a cold gaze. As a transcendent mortal 4 Dan, he found it humiliating to face a weaker, bare-handed cultivator with a weapon. Thus, he chose to fight with his bare hands as well. You should go first. Zhong Xian waved his hands. You. Elder Bai felt so infuriated that his eyelids started leaping. Is this fellow so confident, or is he simply being narcissistic? Given my strength, if I were to make a move first, you won't even get a chance to retaliate. I'm giving you a chance, you know? One must know that the previous competitors had come at him with their strongest moves as soon as the battle started. It was only through their relentless barrage of attacks that they barely managed to survive 20 blows from him. Are you sure you can withstand it if you allow me to go first? All right then. Seeing that the other party had no intention of making a move, Elder Bai's eyebrows shot up. Stepping against the ground, he dashed forward. Voila! After images appeared in his place, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared before the young man. Fall. Seeing that the other party didn't even try to dodge his offense, Elder Bai harumphed coldly and sent a powerful palm at him. Who? But to his shock, his palm struck empty air. At some point, Zhong Xian had suddenly disappeared from his sight. Shit. Narrowing his eyes, Elder Bai hurriedly turned around, only to see a soul appearing right before his eyes. Pa. Before he could even react, he was already sent flying. Crashing heavily onto the wall, the injury he sustained seemed to be even more severe than the previous victim, Elder Wu. Elder Bai spewed large mouthfuls of blood, and for a moment, he was completely stunned. The battle technique he had just executed was known as Shadow Plunder, and it had reached the level of Spirit Intermediate Tier. It was an extremely formidable move which contained innumerable changes and twists that confused one's opponent, making it difficult for one's opponent to differentiate a true attack from a feint. Elder Bai thought that he would be able to toy with the other party once he executed this move. Yet, never in his wildest dreams did he expect for the other party to actually dodge his attack. What made him even more faint-headed was that, unlike other conventional battle techniques where the Ming Men was located at the crotch, below one's armpit, or back, the Ming Men of Shadow Plunder was at one's Qingming acupoint. The Qingming acupoint was located at one's glabella, thus making it exceptionally conspicuous and vulnerable. However, at the same time, it was precisely due to the vulnerability of the location that no one could have imagined that the weakness of the technique was right next to their eyes. This was a secret that even his closest direct disciple and pavilion master Kang didn't know about. Yet, this fellow immediately charged up and struck him on this Ming Men. In an instant, with the strike on his Ming Men, the zhunqi throughout his body immediately dissipated. If not for him releasing his suppressed cultivation at the last moment, thus warding off the impact of the blow with his full might as a transcendent mortal 4 Dan pinnacle, he might have already died from that blow already. The heck? What the hell was going on? I am a transcendent mortal 4 Dan pinnacle expert, and the person I'm fighting with was just a transcendent mortal 1 Dan pinnacle fellow. Even though I suppressed my cultivation, how could I be sent flying with a single kick, and on top of that, almost losing my life from that impact? I am here to gauge his strength, but in the end, I failed to even withstand a single blow. The more he thought about it, the more stifled he felt. The immense frustration he was feeling left his face slightly livid. Struggling down from the wall, Elder Bai began to alleviate the rampant zhunqi within him from that blow. At that moment, the young man walked up to him and asked, "Elder Bai, are you fine?" Humph. Elder Bai harumphed coldly out of embarrassment. However, before he could fully recover, the young man before him lamented under his breath, "The reason why I let you go first is so that you can at least withstand a few more blows. In the end, you didn't even last the first blow. Aren't you a little too weak?" Pu. A mouthful of fresh blood spilt out. The heck? Shouldn't those be my words? I should be the one assessing your strength. How could I have ended up being subdued in a single kick? The more he thought about it, the angrier he felt. As such, he bellowed furiously, Shut up. Shut up. Does Elder Bai want to go another round? The young man said. Aye. Elder Bai immediately went mute. There was a stifled sensation weighing down on his chest, leaving him suffocated. He found himself on the verge of crying. The other party's movements were as swift as lightning. He would surely have been able to dodge the kick at his full strength, but with his strength suppressed to the level of a transcendent mortal one dan. What left Elder Bai even more frustrated was that, even though he was caught off guard in the previous attack, he knew that it was completely impossible for him to avoid the kick with just the cultivation of a transcendent mortal one dan. Harmonized with the environment, this move was exceptionally powerful and swift. On top of that, the other party had found his weakness. Even without considering the other moves that the other party might have in store, just these two factors was more than sufficient to guarantee him a 10 out of 10 matches loss rate. Even more so, he was starting to think whether it might even be possible for him to defeat the other party when his cultivation is suppressed to that of a transcendent mortal 2 dan. Didn't they all say that he's the easiest to deal with because of his weak cultivation? Like hell that is true. Let's go out. Afraid that he might die from anger at the words the other party might say, Elder Bai disregarded his injuries, stood up, and walked out of the door. Seeing that the other party was so anxious to leave, Zhongxian shrugged and followed behind him. Shocked by the sight, Pavilion Master Kang cursed. His voice immediately pulled everyone's gazes to the door of the chamber, and the sight left their eyes widened and blood threatened to spew from their mouths. They saw Elder Bai walking out clutching his chest. A trail of blood flowed down the edge of his mouth, and a bright red shoeprint was imprinted on his face. What happened? Elder Bai is wounded. Wasn't he in the midst of assessing Zhongxian? Everyone looked at one another in bewilderment. Elder Bai had gone in to test Zhongxian, but why did he seem to be in an even worse state than Elder Wu previously was? Look at his face, that shoeprint, and his appearance. Ayo, it would be better to avert one's gaze from him. Otherwise, one might really be tempted to puke. Elder Bai, this. Pavilion Master Kang looked at him with a bizarre expression. Aye. If only there was a hole in the ground now, Elder Bai would surely leap in immediately. I'm sorry, Pavilion Master Kang. It's all my fault. I should have gone easy, just that. I didn't expect Pavilion Master Bai with his cultivation suppressed would be that weak. As such, I failed to control my strength and accidentally injured him. I apologize for that. Zhongxian said apologetically. Weak. Failed to control his strength. Accidentally injured. The other candidates on the stage stared at one another with widened eyes, as though they had seen a ghost. Fu Xiaochen and Ruo Huan Gongzi, who were gleeful a moment ago, stared at each other with trembling bodies. They seemed as if they might faint at any moment now. They thought that this fellow had been knocked out in a single blow, but their conjecture was only half accurate. Someone was indeed knocked out, but that person was Elder Bai. Are our eyes playing tricks on us? That was a transcendent mortal 4 dan pinnacle cultivator, an expert that was second only to Pavilion Master Kang in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. For him to be kicked in the face. When they fought with Elder Bai before, they had exerted every last ounce of strength they had, but even so, they only managed to hold on for 30 blows. Yet, this fellow managed to defeat the other party so easily. They could only feel their vision going dark. They dared not believe this to be real. This. Pavilion Master Kang, Su Shur, and Ling Shi had their mouths agape. They hurriedly turned their gazes over the Elder Bai, wanting to know the exact happenings from him. However, after seeing his nod his head helplessly, in an instant, it was as though lightning was rumbling around them. The shock they suffered as so great that it would no longer be surprising if they were to fall dead now. They had just agreed on that due to Zhongshi's rapid rise in cultivation, it was impossible for him to survive 10 blows from Elder Bai. Only at this moment did they know that it was Elder Bai who was too weak for the other party. Alright, now that Zhongshi has completed his test. Allow me to re-announce the result. Forced to change his words once more, Pavilion Master Kang's face flushed. In first place, Zhongshi. In second place, Fu Xiaochen. In third place, Ruo Huan Gongzi. In fourth place, Feng Mosheng and Du Hu. Once again, obtaining the first place, Zhongxian proved to be the dark horse of the selection round once again. There was no choice but to give him first place. The test was to withstand as many blows from Elder Bai as possible, but he went on ahead to knock the other party out. The difference between him and the other candidates was as great as the difference between heaven and earth. There was no choice but to concede to him. All right, let's move on to the third test. Knowing that this would never come to an end if they were to dawdle on this matter, Pavilion Master Kang glanced at the surroundings and decisively announced, "We've covered soul depth and cultivation in the first two tests. Even though these two factors are important, they are only the fundamentals to becoming a master teacher. To become a truly outstanding master teacher, one has to be proficient in the art of knowledge impartation. Thus, this shall be what will be assessed in the third round." In a usual examination, the examinees would hide their identity, join an academy as a teacher, and take a class for a period of several months to 2 years. After which, the students of the examinees will be put against one another, and this will serve as an evaluation of the teacher's ability to impart knowledge. However, there are only 2 months left to the Master Teacher Tournament, so we don't have enough time to do so much. Thus, I thought of a much more efficient and effective way to test the candidate's ability to impart knowledge. That is, continuity of spiritual wisdom. Pavilion Master Kang declared. Continuity of spiritual wisdom? What is that? I'm not too sure as well. I've only heard of spiritual wisdom. If I'm not mistaken, it's an ability that painters would gain upon after reaching 5-star. It's an ability to infuse wisdom into the characters of the painting, granting them the ability to absorb spiritual energy from the air and sustain themselves for a very long time. Now that you speak of it, I do remember it being so. Such a work is known as a painting of the 6th level. Indeed. Reality depiction, spiritual canvas, infused intentions, breathtaking verisimilitude, spirit creation, spiritual wisdom. Only 5-star painters are capable of creating a painting of this level, and unfortunately, there's no one possessing such ability in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Since spiritual wisdom is an ability belonging to that of a 5-star painter, what could continuity of spiritual wisdom be? And how can it assess a person's ability to impart knowledge? The crowd below discussed with perplexed expressions. None of them were able to understand the concept of continuity of spiritual wisdom. Even Zhongxian frowned as well. However, there was one exception. Upon hearing the content of the test, Ruo Huangong's face immediately glowed in delight, and he clenched his fists in agitation. As a 4-star painter, this test was advantageous to him. Chapter 538. First up, Zhongxian seems like everyone isn't too sure on what it is about. Since that's the case, allow me to explain. Seeing the doubt in everyone's eyes, Pavilion Master Kang smiled. I believe everyone here should be aware of the concept of spiritual wisdom. It is the 6th level of a painting, and at this level, the characters within the painting are able to absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings to materialize. And the idea of continuity of spiritual wisdom actually is to conduct a lecture for these painted characters. Conduct a lecture for the characters in the painting? Hearing the explanation, everyone was stunned. The concept of spiritual wisdom was different from intelligence. Even though the characters in the painting had gained sentience, as beings forged of spiritual energy, they had no intelligence. Since they had no intelligence, what was the use of imparting them knowledge? Could they even understand the content of the lesson? Since all of us here are master teachers, you all should know that a master teacher's lecture usually utilizes impartation of heaven's will. The more one's theory is recognized by the heavens, the greater the concentration of spiritual energy gathered in the surrounding. Pavilion Master Kang said. Everyone nodded their heads. Impartation of heavens did have the ability to gather spiritual energy. It was said that whenever Kong Shi conducted a lesson, the amount of spiritual energy that gathered was more than sufficient to create a spirit mountain. Putting aside Kong Shi, even Hong Shi Hongqian, a 5-star primary master teacher of Hongfeng Empire Master Teacher Pavilion who had just conducted a lesson here, was capable of spirit-gathering diction. Nourished under the immense concentration of spiritual energy in the area, those participating in the lecture unwittingly experienced a rise in their cultivation. This was the ability that all master teachers possessed. However, its effectiveness depended on the proficiency of the person. Hongfeng Empire was a vassal state of Huanyu Empire. Just like kingdoms, empire could be classified as conferred, Tier 1, Tier 2, and unranked. Huanyu was a Tier 2 empire, whereas Hongfeng was, just like how Tianxian was an unranked kingdom, an unranked empire. It was on the same level as Mingxia Empire, Hunghai Empire, and Myriad Kingdom Alliance. However, a master teacher of this level would never remain in an unranked empire forever. It wouldn't be long before the regional headquarters summoned him over to an even higher-tiered master teacher pavilion to study. In fact, the reason why Hong Qian was dispatched here was because he was heading to Huanyu Empire. The top-ranking geniuses in the master teacher tournament, on top of earning huge rewards, would be given a chance to study at Huanyu Empire's Master Teacher Academy. Even though painted characters that have gained spiritual wisdom can't live on like ordinary life forms, they are able to absorb spiritual energy and sustain themselves for a very long time. As such, they are exceptionally sensitive to the spiritual energy in their surroundings. If the theories one speaks of in their lecture are aligned with the essence of the world, spiritual energy will gather, thus allowing them to sustain for a longer period of time. On the other hand, failure to do so will make them dissipate swiftly. Through this, we can accurately assess a master teacher's ability to impart knowledge without worrying for any bias, Pavilion Master Kang explained. I see. Such a method would indeed be the fairest. Understanding the situation, the crowd nodded their heads in agreement. As those spiritual wisdom beings only recognized spiritual energy, the judgment for the test would be impartial. After all, human judgment was always unwittingly or wittingly tied with emotions. If a person finds himself liking a certain teacher's lessons very much, he might overestimate the effectiveness on the lesson. At the same time, he would tend to underplay the effectiveness of the lessons of other teachers. Such bias was set into the personality of humans and it couldn't be changed. After all, other than Empyrean Kongsha, no matter how formidable a master teacher was, they couldn't possibly win the trust and admiration of everyone else. If they were to find students here to assess the teaching capability of the candidates, given that Ruo Huangongzi and Fu Xiaochen, as famous geniuses of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, had many fans here, it would surely be easier for them to win the students over. This would have made the test unfair. On the other hand, the painting characters didn't possess such emotions. They wouldn't be awed by one's reputation or be charmed by a person's appearance. Instead, they would only react to the movement of the spiritual energy generated by the lecture. This would ensure the fairness of the test. Yuan. Coming to a realization, Zhongxian nodded his head as well. He had learned about spiritual wisdom from the painting books he had collected into the Library of Heaven's Path. Spiritual wisdom beings only reacted to spiritual energy. Even impartation of heaven's will couldn't influence them at all. The same went for painters as well. Unless one was the painter of the very painting, their ability to influence the actions of spiritual wisdom beings was severely limited. Since everyone understands the rules, let's begin the competition then. Elder Yun, I'll be troubling you this time around. Seeing that everyone in the hall had no objections to the matter, Pavilion Master Kang invited Elder Yun up with a smile. Don't worry. An elder stood up from the crowd. I knew that it would be Elder Yun. Elder Yun, as the only 4-star pinnacle painter of the Master Teacher Pavilion, is the most authoritative on the subject of paintings. Naturally, the test concerning spiritual wisdom should be invigilated by him. More importantly, that painting of soaring birds is a masterpiece left behind by a 5-star painter. It will be the most appropriate to use it for the examination. That painting is Elder Yun's most prized possession and he never takes it out. I've long heard of it, but I've never got the chance to see it before. Looks like my eyes will be in for a feast this time around. Indeed. 6th-level paintings are extremely rare. Most likely, one won't be able to find a second one throughout the entire Myriad Kingdom Alliance. That might not necessarily be so. I heard that the Appraiser Hall has a work that is on par with this. However, it'll be difficult to access the items there. Upon seeing the elder, hushed discussions could be heard among the crowd. Just like Ruo Huangongzi, Elder Yun's main supporting occupation was a painter. Furthermore, his rank was significantly higher than the latter, reaching 4-star pinnacle. At this level, even excluding his identity as a master teacher, he could be considered as a top-notch figure in Myriad Kingdom City. At the Pavilion Master's request, I shall be conducting this test. Ignoring the discussions below, Elder Yoon walked up to the candidates, flicked his wrist, and a rolled-up painting appeared in his hands. This painting of soaring birds was a gift my painting teacher bestowed to me. Voila! As he spoke, the painting abruptly unrolled and a flock of birds soared into the air, chirping delightfully as they frolicked about. These birds were completely lifelike, and unlike the beings created from a spirit creation painting, it was impossible to tell a real from fake if they were mingled with one another. After escaping from the painting, they flew in a space 3 kai around the painting. Only after 2 minutes had passed did they finally return to the painting. The characters in a spiritual wisdom painting can absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings to materialize in an area around the painting. However, there's a time limit to it, and 2 minutes is the limit. Whoever who is able to keep them materialized for the longest time possible with their lecture will be the winner of this round. Elder Yoon elaborated on the rules of the test before turning his gaze to the candidates. Alright, let's start the test. Who wants to go first? The candidates stared at one another. Even though they had some understanding of painting, they had never come into contact with spiritual wisdom paintings before. They had no experience in sustaining the materialization of a spiritual wisdom being, and they had nothing to refer to as well. Ruo Huangongzi was about to take a step forward when he abruptly paused. Turning to Zhongxian, he smiled. Zhongshe, why don't you go first? Since you placed first in the earlier 2 rounds, your ability to impart knowledge must be extraordinary as well. Why don't you allow us to take a look so that we can learn from you? Before the tournament, the opponent which he was the wariest about was Fu Xiaochen. However, this had changed after seeing Zhongxian's outstanding performance in the previous 2 rounds. Me? All right. Zhongxian nodded his head. It can't be that you wish to go last every time just so that you can make use of the experience of others to better your... What did you say? All right. You're willing to go up first. Ruo Huangongzi thought that the other party would reject the invitation immediately just like in the first round, and thus, he had even prepared a long speech to pressure the other party. However, halfway through his words, he heard the other party's reply and froze. It felt as though his punch had struck empty space, and this made him so stifled that he felt like spurting blood. Continuity of spiritual wisdom. Most master teachers had never heard of such a bizarre test before. Shouldn't the other party be thinking of learning from the experience of others before making a move? Why did he agree to it so readily? Wasn't he being too eccentric? Elder Yoon, allow me. Uninterested by the immense shock Ruo Huangongzi was suffering from, Zhongxian stepped forward. In truth, he had wanted to allow others to go first due to having never seen such a test before. However, given that he had gone last for the previous 2 tests, he felt embarrassed to continue acting like that. In any case, since he had made sense of the rules already, there probably wasn't too much of a difference between going first and going last. You! Upon seeing Zhongxian stepping forward, Elder Yoon's mouth twitched. He had seen the proceedings of the previous tests. This black horse that came from nowhere destroyed Elder Wu in the first round and nearly killed Elder Bai in the second. If there was one candidate he was the most fearful of, it would definitely be him. Who knew what kind of mess he would cause this time around? But even so, he wasn't in a place to stop the other party from going first. Thus, he nodded his head and said, as soon as I activate the painting and the birds soar out from it, you can begin your lecture. The content you are allowed to lecture on is not limited. Your ranking will be decided by how much spiritual energy you can gather and how long the birds stay materialized for. UN. Zhongxian nodded his head. The rules were simple, there was nothing doubtful about it. Seeing that the other party had fully comprehended the rules, Elder Yoon placed his palm on the painting. Alright, let's begin then. 1. The birds from before soared out from the painting. As expected of a spiritual wisdom painting. Absorbing spiritual energy from the air, the birds that emerged from the painting were exceptionally eye-catching and there was a bizarre sense of aesthetics to them. Since this is a painting, I'll talk about painting then. After a moment of hesitation, Zhongxian made up his decision. As long as the lecture he spoke of was able to pull in spiritual energy from the surroundings, there was no difference to the content he spoke of. Painting isn't just a depiction of reality. More importantly, one has to harness their emotions into their work before an art piece can be granted as soul. The reorganized Heaven's Path paint art appeared before him, and he began deciphering it slowly based on his comprehension of it. In Tianxian Kingdom, he had duplicated all of the painting books in Master Lu Chen's study. After which, in the libraries at Tianwu Kingdom, Honghai Kingdom, and various other locations, there were a significant number of books on painting as well. After organizing and assimilating the knowledge harnessed within those books, most probably, even Elder Yun, a 4-star pinnacle painter, would be far from a match for him in the subject. If not for that, how could he possibly have induced the appraiser halls rousing from drunken dreams to reach the 7th level just by granting it a name? Even if he was able to see through the painting's flaws via the Library of Heaven's Path, without a strong foundation in painting, it would surely be impossible for him to accomplish this feat. His voice was well-paced, and his explanations for the profound and abstract concepts were shockingly simple. More importantly, they were all directed to the true essence of painting itself. His lecture was well-planned, slowly delving from the surface into the depths, pulling everyone along with his line of thoughts. If there was one thing to criticize anything about his lecture, it would be that he was only lecturing on the bare fundamentals of painting. I didn't expect for Zhongshi's comprehension of painting to reach such an astounding level. After listening for a moment, Pavilion Master Kang's face was marked with shock. He thought that Zhongshi would use impartation of Heaven's will to lecture on topics regarding cultivation. He didn't expect the latter's comprehension of painting to be so deep as well. It seemed like the other party's deep knowledge didn't just stop at cultivation techniques and cultivation itself. As expected of a master teacher who was able to even beguile him, formidable, the consumption of spiritual energy by spiritual wisdom beings to sustain their materialization is exceedingly high. Even with the spirit-gathering diction of a 5-star master teacher, the materialization of spiritual wisdom beings still can't be sustained for too long. Just as Pavilion Master Kang was immersed in his awe for the young man on the stage, Susha turned to look at him and asked, "Pavilion Master Kang, in your view, how long do you think Zhongsha can sustain the materialization for?" Chapter 539, Return My Bird. Spiritual wisdom painting had been granted sentience by the painter, allowing them to absorb spiritual energy from the surroundings to emerge from a painting. As their existences hinged on spiritual energy itself, their spiritual energy requirement was very high, and they were exceptionally sensitive to fluctuations of spiritual energy in the surroundings. Under normal conditions, it would be impossible to sustain their materialization for too long. In fact, even under the spirit-gathering diction of a 5-star master teacher, their materialization will only be extended by a slightly longer period of time. As such, the test wasn't as easy as it seemed. In Susha's view, even though Zhongxian was talented in painting as well, he was only a 3-star painter, as well as from Tianwu Kingdom, and not to mention, the content he spoke of was the bare fundamentals. It would be difficult for him to gather sufficient spiritual energy to sustain the spiritual wisdom for too long. If he had lectured on cultivation, I think he would have lasted for 15 minutes or so. After all, even Elder Yun only managed to sustain the materialization for 13 minutes. Pavilion Master Kang replied, after a moment of contemplation. After confirming the content of the test, Elder Yun had tried it out himself. However, despite being a 4-star master teacher, he was only able to sustain the materialization for 13 minutes. Given that Zhongxian's comprehension of cultivation was even above his, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to surpass Elder Yun's record. But even so, 15 minutes was probably the cap. After all, the more basic the content was, the harder it was to draw in spiritual energy. Given that his lecturing on painting, not to mention the bare fundamentals of it, I think even 8 minutes will be a hurdle for him. That's my evaluation as well. Susha nodded. Even though the two of them weren't painters, they had still browsed through a fair number of books regarding the topic. It wasn't hard for them to tell that Zhongxian was only touching on the most basic concepts. On top of that, there was no clear movement in the spiritual energy in the surroundings. It would be nigh impossible for him to sustain the materialization for any longer than that. With just 8 minutes, it'll be difficult for him to take first place. Ruo Huan Gongzi, as a 4-star painter and 4-star master teacher, will definitely be able to surpass the 10 minutes barrier. Ling Shi couldn't help but interject. The other two nodded their heads in agreement. Jun Ruo Huan, as a painter, was extremely familiar with the concept of spiritual wisdom. With this advantage, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to maintain the materialization for more than 10 minutes. With just 8 minutes, it would be difficult for Zhongshe to secure even the second place. Look, the spiritual wisdom is already beginning to sway. It's already on the verge of dissipating. Everyone turned their gazes over. At the current moment, the chirping of the birds above the painting was slowly getting less and less crisp, and their body was swaying ceaselessly, as though a candlelight on the verge of extinguishing. But it has only been 3 minutes. How can his results be this poor? Indeed. Even without conducting a lecture, those spiritual beings are able to sustain their materialization for 2 minutes. What is going on? Everyone frowned. Given how spiritual wisdom beings can sustain their existence for 2 minutes even without any external assistance, for the birds to shake at the 3rd minute. This showed that the spiritual energy drawn in by Zhongshe was minimal, perhaps even negligible. I'll be taking first place for sure. Ruo Huan Gongzi's eyes lit up. Given how that fellow was unable to sustain the materialization for even 5 minutes, he would surely finish in 6th place. Even though Ruo Huan Gongzi's results were inferior to Zhong Xian in the first 2 rounds, with this opportunity, he was confident in making a comeback and obtaining first place overall. In the end, how could a person who came from a lower-tiered kingdom compare to a conferred kingdom's top-notch genius? Master-teacher tournament was a test on one's capability in all aspects. One couldn't hope to achieve a good placing with just overwhelming strength or a powerful soul depth only. Looks like inviting him to go up first was a good thing. Without any experience, how can he hope to achieve good results? Ruo Huan Gongzi's lips curled up. Given how even the master teachers of Myriad Kingdom Alliance had never heard of continuity of spiritual wisdom, what could a countryside bumpkin like the other party know about it? Perhaps, if he were to get the other party to go up first for the subsequent rounds as well, the other party might fare poorly as well. The more Ruo Huan Gongzi thought about it, the more excited he felt. It was to the extent that he nearly burst out laughing. Fu Xiaochen also heaved a sigh of relief. He was currently in the 3rd place, and if that fellow were to continue clinching the top spot, he would surely be eliminated. Thus, upon seeing this situation, he felt relieved instead. It's a relief that he didn't cause anything this time around. Elder Yun wiped the sweat off his forehead. Given the huge ruckus that fellow caused in the first 2 rounds, Elder Yun thought that the other party might do the same in this round, leaving him in an incomparably awkward position. But from the looks of it now, he was worrying needlessly. Painting seemed to be a weakness of the other party. Just as the burden was lifted off his heart and he was waiting for the spiritual wisdom beings to disappear, he suddenly thought of something and froze. Something is wrong. If the spiritual wisdom beings are about to dissipate, they should do so in less than a few breaths. Since that is a fact, how could they still be materialized at this very moment? On top of that, even though the spiritual wisdom beings were swaying violently, it doesn't seem like they are about to dissipate. Under normal circumstances, as soon as the body of a spiritual wisdom being starts to sway, it'll disappear within seconds. If so, how could these spiritual energy beings sway for a minute but still remain materialized? Wait, why does it seem like the body of the spiritual energy beings are getting more and more substantial instead? Now that you speak of it. The others were also starting to realize that something was off. They had carefully assessed the dissipation of the spiritual wisdom beings when Elder Yun opened up the scroll and did a demonstration before the test. Once swaying occurred, the gathered spiritual energy would dissipate swiftly. Yet, even though the spiritual energy beings were swaying so violently that normal birds would have become stark naked by now, the spiritual energy forming them didn't dissipate. Instead, as Zhongshe continued with his lesson, they seemed to be becoming more and more corporeal. This was completely defying common sense. Those spiritual energy beings should have dissipated by that swaying, and yet, Why did it seem like they were being nourished instead? What was going on? Wait, something is wrong. A deep frown appeared on Elder Yoon's forehead. Just like that, another few more minutes passed. But even as Zhongxian was about to pass the 10 minutes mark, the spiritual energy beings still hadn't dissipated. On the contrary, their bodies were becoming more and more corporeal. It was as though an image was slowly coming to life. Suddenly, Elder Yoon thought of something and his eyes narrowed. Could this be? But impossible. Elder Yoon exclaimed as frenzy covered his entire face. What's wrong with Elder Yoon? It can't be that all the elders who were tested by that lad will be reduced to such a state. Seeing the usually composed Elder Yoon acting in such a manner, Elder Wu and Elder Bai's mouths twitched as well. The both of them had been severely injured while assessing that lad, and now, Elder Yoon was acting in a similar manner as well. There seemed to be something really sinister about that lad. Elder Yoon. Pavilion Master Kang walked up and patted his shoulder. What's wrong? Nothing. Just that, I thought of something unbelievable. Elder Yoon regained his senses from that pat and said. Something unbelievable? Pavilion Master Kang frowned. Look. Elder Yoon pointed to the spiritual wisdom beings in front of Zhongxian. These spiritual wisdom beings have been swaying for quite some time now, and it has been at least 10 minutes since it started. However, not only have they not dissipated, they are even getting more and more corporeal. Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head in agreement. Everyone had seen it happening and they thought it was weird as well. Was there really something wrong with it? If I'm not wrong, this isn't dissipation but... Elder Yoon's lips trembled in shock. Elation of unearthed disposition, enlightened spirit. Enlightened spirit? You mean the 7th level of painting? In a painting of that level, all beings, be it animals or plants, will possess their own sentience as though true living beings. They are capable of soaring beyond the painting and maintain their form for a very long time. Pavilion Master Kang was taken aback. That's right. Elder Yoon nodded. But that can't be. To create an enlightened spirit painting requires one to be at least a 6-star painter to modify or redraw the painting, to do so via a lecture. How is that even possible? Pavilion Master Kang widened his eyes in disbelief. Painters that had comprehended that level could easily draw birds that could soar through the skies. Rumor had it that a formidable 6-star painter had once drawn a divine crane on a wall and soared into the skies on its materialized form, leaving behind the legend of immortal departing on the divine crane. There was also another legend depicting a grandmaster painter being caught in a spirit beast stampede. As such, he drew a pinnacle spirit beast whose aura sent all of the spirit beasts fleeing in fright. All occupations, upon reaching a certain level, would possess unimaginable strength and means. Just that, this miracle needed one to be at least a 6-star painter to work on a painting on the spot. For a spiritual wisdom to become an enlightened spirit via a lecture, that was completely unprecedented and unheard of. The content that Zhongsha spoke of is extremely compatible with the spiritual wisdom beings. Not only did it draw in spiritual energy, it even caused these spiritual wisdom beings to start cultivating. If I'm not mistaken, the swaying is actually an attempt to rid themselves of the impure spiritual energy from before, thus turning their energy even more concrete. In other words, ridding phantasm to materialize. Elder Yoon said. Ridding phantasm to materialize? How is that possible? Pavilion Master Kang was so astonished that he nearly fainted on the spot. Are you serious? Just by conducting a lecture for the spiritual wisdom beings, they actually underwent ridding phantasm to materialize and became enlightened spirits. Why did it sound like utter nonsense? I also find it hard to believe, but there is no plausible explanation other than this, Elder Yoon said. Even though he had guessed it, he still found it hard to believe. That was why he lost his composure for a moment. Suddenly, Pavilion Master Kang thought of a question. If that's true, usually, the breakthrough is done by modifying the painting. As the spiritual wisdom beings are in the painting while undergoing the breakthrough, the painting serves as their home, and thus, they can be summoned back through it. But if the spiritual wisdom beings were to achieve a breakthrough via such a lecture, would they still return to the painting? If the enlightened spirits were to originate from the painting, Even if they were to leave, they would still return to the painting when they needed to rest. However, these spiritual wisdom beings were making a breakthrough outside of the painting. Given that they didn't materialize from the painting, there would be nothing tying them to the painting. If so, would they still return? If they were to fly away and refuse to return to the painting, how would the results be tabulated? More importantly, how could the test continue under such circumstances? Ah! Crap, don't allow him to continue speaking. Elder Yoon froze for a moment before hurriedly shouting. However, before he could do any practical action, the birds in the painting suddenly stopped swaying and a harmonized chirp suddenly echoed in the hall. Jijijiji, kiki. Their pleasant call reverberated across the entire hall. It was as if a group of playful birds had visited them, and their presence in itself was an enjoyment. At the same time, the slightly incorporeal birds from before seemed to have achieved a qualitative evolution. Their feathers became more lifelike, and their claws and beak became more defined. It was as if they had truly come to life this time around. Hoo! After the chirping, the birds flapped their wings and darted out of the hall, headed for the distance. It didn't take long before they disappeared from everyone's sight. Seeing the departing birds and the empty paper left on the table, Elder Yoon froze for a moment before his body began trembling. That was an unparalleled work that his teacher had left for him. He cherished it so much that his heart ached just by showing it to another. Even his closest of friends had to plead with him for a very long time just for a glance. He thought that it should be fine taking it out for such an important test, but who knew that the spiritual wisdom beings contained within it would actually all fly away? What the heck? Now that all of the spiritual wisdom beings had flown away, what use was this blank piece of paper? He had just heaved a sigh of relief in having been spared when such a sight occurred. Was this fellow here to compete in the selection round or to wreak havoc? With a trembling body, he walked up to Zhong Xian. At this moment, he felt so much rage that he hated the fact he couldn't tear that imbecile before him into pieces. My bird. You, return my bird. Chapter 540. I'll just draw another one for you, my bird. Return my bird. At that moment, the master teachers in the room hadn't realized that those birds were leaving for good. As such, they immediately thought of the other meaning of Elder Yoon's words. They immediately turned to gaze at the latter's crotch and shivered in disgust. It seemed like Zhongsha had only conducted a lecture. How in the world does your bird come into play in this situation? Furthermore, wasn't it still attached? For a 4-star master teacher to ask another person about his bird in public, truly, this was too shameful. Many female master teachers blushed in embarrassment upon hearing so. As a painter, Elder Yoon possessed a refined disposition, so many thought of him as an upright and dashing person. To think that he would be an old pervert instead. That's not right. Maybe Elder Yoon is referring to the birds that just escape. Slowly, some among the crowd realized it. Ah! The crowd was taken aback, and that person described his observation. After listening to Zhongsha's lesson, those birds seemed to have suddenly become lively. They escaped from the restraints of the painting paper and flew away. Flew away. This painting of soaring birds is centered around the birds, and its greatest value lies in those spiritual wisdom birds. If they were to fly away, wouldn't the painting become totally worthless? Indeed. That's precisely the reason why Elder Yoon went into a frenzy. That is a spiritual wisdom painting, it's worth a huge fortune, you know. For a treasure which he cherished so much to be reduced into a worthless piece of paper. There is no one who can retain their rationality before that. Hearing the explanation, everyone finally understood what was going on. They stared at one another as their mouth twitched violently. On the other hand, Elder Wu and Elder Bai stared at one another in relief. At the very least, they were only injured. All they had to do was to condition themselves for a period of time to make a complete recovery. On the other hand, that painting was Elder Yoon's most prized possession. For it to become worthless in the blink of an eye, it was already a huge fortune that he didn't lose sight of himself and tear that fellow apart on the spot. Ruo Huan Gongzi, who just a moment ago had still been gleeful at being able to take first place this time around, cried tearfully. Just by undergoing a lecture, A spiritual wisdom being actually advanced to become an enlightened spirit and flew away. He had made some calculations before and he was confident that he'd be able to get the spiritual wisdom being to maintain its materialization for over 10 minutes. But this fellow actually allowed the spiritual wisdom being to fly away for good. What the heck? Do you need to be so fierce? If you do it like that, how do you expect for the rest of us to compete with you? If you always do that, you'll find yourself without friends. Cough cough. Elder Yun, calm down. Seeing his usually composed old friend getting so agitated that he looked like he could murder someone, Elder Su hurried forward to calm him. Calm down? The heck that can I calm down now? That's a painting that my teacher left to me. I was still planning to study it every day so that I can achieve a breakthrough to become a 5-star painter. Given that this has happened, how in the world can I reach higher ranks now? Lowering his head to glance at the white paper on the table, Elder Yun gritted his teeth. Who said that this was just a test, and it would be extremely simple? Come out. I promise I won't hit you. Just as he was frenzied, the young man opposite him spoke with a slightly doubtful voice. I hadn't finished my lecture when you scared those birds away. How are you going to tabulate the timing for me like that? Elder Yun wasn't the only one who was angry. Zhong Xian was also a little frustrated at the situation. Wasn't this old man a little too unreliable? He was in the midst of imparting the Heaven's Path paint art to help these spiritual wisdom beings gather their strength. If he were to succeed, they would be able to fly wherever they pleased and maintain their existence as long as they wanted to. Who knew that before he was done, this fellow bellowed loudly, scaring all of the birds away. Now that all of the birds had left, how was his result supposed to be calculated? How wronged he would be if he were to lose because of this. After all, he put a lot of effort into this test. Tabulate the timing. The painting of soaring birds is already gone, and you're still telling me about the timing? Elder Yun nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. Tabulate your head. You wrecked my treasure, but not only did you not feel the slightest guilt, you are still only thinking about your test. Are you really that gutsy or is there something wrong with your head? Cough cough, Zhongsha. You should also tone it down. The value of the painting of soaring birds lay in those birds. Their disappearance also means that the treasure has been rendered worthless. It is natural that Elder Yun is in a bad mood because of it. Stepping forward, Pavilion Master Kang attempted to calm the situation. Rendered worthless? Zhong Xian shook his head. Since the scroll is still here, one just has to draw the birds back. Is there a need to make such a fuss about it? That's a painting of the 6th level. Only 5-star painters are capable of producing it. This is the only one that can be found in Myriad Kingdom City, and you speak of drawing them back? That's easy for you to say. Sensing an opportunity, Ruo Huan Gongzi clasped his fist and stepped forward. Teacher, since the painting of soaring birds has been destroyed, the rest of us are unable to continue with the examination. Why don't we change the format of the test then? The other party's lecture had made even the spiritual wisdom beings evolve to become enlightened spirits. He wouldn't be able to triumph over the other party for sure if they were to continue with this test. If so, he might as well make use of this opportunity to change the test. Yuan, you're right. The painting of soaring birds is the only spiritual wisdom painting in the entire Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Since it's ruined now, the rest of you are indeed unable to proceed with the test. Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head in agreement. If only he'd know that this would be the case, he would have never allowed this fellow to take the test first. Now, not only was the painting ruined, the other candidates also lost their chances at taking the test. The continuity of spiritual wisdom was the best assessment for impartation of knowledge he could think of. This situation was too abrupt, and he couldn't think of a better idea on the spot. If there are no better ideas, why don't we just find a few students, blindfold them, and vary our voices so that they won't be able to recognize us? The test should still be relatively fair this way as well. Ruo Huan Gongzi suggested. There's no rush for that. Allow me to confer with the other elders first. Ah, what's going on? Nodding his head, Pavilion Master Kang rubbed his glabella, frustrated by the situation before him when he suddenly saw something in his peripheral vision that astounded him. Teacher, what's wrong? Seeing his teacher losing his composure, Ruo Huangongzi was taken aback. He immediately traced his teacher's glance and he failed to catch his breath and faint on the spot. Unknowingly, the young man whom he had just criticized was standing before the painting. In each of his hands was a brush, and currently, harmoniously chirping birds had reappeared on the previously blank painting of soaring birds. All of the birds have returned? Pavilion Master Kang asked hoarsely. It's not that they returned but… Zhongsha just drew them on. Fu Xiaochen replied with a quivering voice. Just drawn them on. Ruo Huangongzi's body trembled. That was a spiritual wisdom painting. It was a masterpiece that only 5-star painters were capable of producing. To paint it out so casually, are you for real? More importantly, even 5-star painters had to contemplate for many months to conceptualize and perfect such a painting. It was a grueling task created with an astounding level of effort. Yet, before he was done speaking, the other party was already done restoring the painting. Need you be that fast? Unable to maintain his composure, Ruo Huangongzi asked, what kind of painting method did he use? To finish a painting in just 10 breaths or so, what kind of painting method could be that fast? Dual traversing dragons. Fu Xiaochen replied in disbelief. You mean the technique that only street-side craftsmen use? Ruo Huangongzi's vision went dark. If you had used some profound technique, I would have just conceded. But to use the dual traversing dragon which street-side craftsmen use to mass-produce paintings, not to mention for a 6th-level painting. Brother, tell me the truth. You aren't really a 3-star painter, right? You are actually a 6-star painter in disguise, aren't you? It was laughable that he leaped in delight when he heard that the test was continuity of spiritual wisdom. He thought that the other party would surely fail terribly when going first. If he'd known that the other party was such a formidable painter, he would have never acted so arrogantly. Keeping the brush and ink back into his storage ring, Zhongxian said impassively, All right, Elder Yun. I've restored your painting for you. It doesn't seem too difficult to do so. He thought that it was a big deal after hearing Elder Yun screaming and yelling. Wasn't it just a painting? If the birds were to fly away, he could just paint some more on for the other party. Was there any need to make such a huge fuss? This. Hurrying forward, Elder Yun lowered his head to examine the painting before him. After a quick glance, his lips quivered, and he stared at the young man before him as though he was a monster. This painting was identical to the one he saw before. If not for the fact that the ink wasn't dry yet, he would have really suspected that everything that had happened before was a hallucination on his part. With just a glance, the other party was able to remember every single detail of the picture perfectly, the arrangement, amount of ink used for each stroke, positioning, and not to mention, even the artistic conception. How in the world did he do it? One must know that every painter had their individual experience and style. When copying another's work, chances were that one would unwittingly incorporate their style into it as well. As such, it was hard for any painting to be completely identical with another. Yet, not only was the painting before him completely identical to its previous version, even the feeling it exuded was no different. This was completely inconceivable. Even a 6-star painter would be incapable of such a feat. Actually, at Zhongxian's current level, he could only produce a painting of such a level by copying from another. If he were to paint by himself, while he was still capable of producing a spiritual wisdom painting, it would be hard for him to reach the level of artistic conception contained within the painting of soaring birds. After all, even though he had grasped Heaven's Path paint art, it was only at the level around 4-star pinnacle and 5-star primary. The main reason why he could produce a completely identical painting was because of the Eye of Insight. The Eye of Insight was capable of peering into minuscule details that one's physical eyes were incapable of perceiving. Back when Elder Yun took out the painting, Zhongxian had examined it properly with the Eye of Insight. As such, restoring it to its ordinary form wasn't a challenge to him at all. If he had tried to do it with his own capability instead of copying the previous work, it would truly have been hard for him to reach a painting of such a level. However, Elder Yun was unaware of all these facts. As such, he was shocked by the other party. He felt so impressed that he could almost kowtow to the other party at this instant. Pavilion Master Kang walked forward and asked, "How is it?" Recovering from his shock, Elder Yoon swallowed a mouthful and saliva and said, "It's exactly the same as before. We can continue on with the test." Since Elder Yoon said that it was fine, let's continue on with the test then. Heaving a sigh of relief, Pavilion Master Kang turned to look at the crowd. Given that the painting of soaring birds had been restored, there was no longer any need for him to worry about varying the format of the test anymore. Ruo Huan Gongzi was on the verge of tears. After such a huge ruckus, his efforts turned out to be futile. If only he'd known so in advance, he wouldn't have wasted his breath. Frustrated, Ruo Huan Gongzi mustered his courage and challenged the examination. However, due to his unstable state of mind, he only managed to sustain for 11 minutes before the spiritual wisdom being dissipated. After him, Fu Xiaochen, Feng Mosheng, and the others also stepped forward to challenge the test. What was surprising was that Luo Shi had managed to sustain for 12 minutes, achieving a result even higher than Ruo Huan Gongzi. "All right, I shall announce the results of the test." Zhong Shuo, through his lecture, managed to induce the evolution of the spiritual wisdom beings into enlightened spirits, and as of yet, they haven't returned. No one should have any qualms about him being ranked first, right? After everyone was done taking the test, Pavilion Master Kang began announcing the results and scanned the crowd for any objections. Right. Everyone's lips twitched. Given how the other party managed to materialize all of the spiritual wisdom beings fully and produced a painting of the 6th level, if he wasn't in first place, who would dare to proclaim themselves first? Good. In second place is Luo Shi, third place Ruo Huan, fourth place Fu Xiaochen, fifth place Feng Mosheng, and sixth place Du Hu. After announcing the results, Pavilion Master Kang continued, "We'll be moving on to the 4th examination, comprehension of cultivation." Chapter 541, 9 Swords of Scarlet Lotus. Only with a deep understanding of cultivation can a master teacher accurately point out and correct the flaws and errors in his student. Otherwise, if theory is all he knows, he won't be able to guide his student correctly. Thus, the cultivation of a master teacher and his ability to see through a person's core is of utmost importance as well. As such, I've discussed with the other elders and we have decided to not follow the usual conventions for this comprehension of cultivation test. Instead, a new battle technique was designed just for this test. Later on, you will be given an incense's time, 15 minutes, to learn it, and your result will be judged based on how deep your comprehension of the battle technique is. Don't worry. This battle technique is completely new, so there's no need to worry about the test being leaked to any of the candidates beforehand, Pavilion Master Kang explained. There's no way the topic could have been leaked beforehand. Master teachers value fairness and equality. If an investigation were to be conducted and one is found to be guilty, one will be stripped of his license. How could anyone possibly do it knowing of such consequences? Even if it's unfair, given that Ruo Huan Gongzi is the Pavilion Master's student, the test should be biased to him. But it seems like he is on the verge of crumbling from the consecutive blows. Indeed. Despite being the head of the 4 gentlemen, look at his current state. He looks like a defeated rooster. Right, Pavilion Master Kang, what battle technique will it be? If it's too easy, given the talents of the candidates, they will all surely be able to fully comprehend it within an incense's time. If that happens, how will we evaluate the results? Hearing the rules, some of the audience expressed their doubts. One's mastery of battle techniques could be divided into 5 main levels: novice, initiate, minor accomplishment, major accomplishment, and consummation. Novice meant that one has barely understood the battle technique and was able to forcibly execute it. At initiate level, one was able to harness some might in the technique, but one might still be a little restrained in its control. At minor accomplishment, one's understanding of the battle technique had already reached a profound level. It could be utilized as an ace up one's sleeves. One must know that most fighters had only trained their battle techniques to this point. Beyond that were major accomplishment and consummation. However, without decades of effort, it was impossible to reach that. If this battle technique was easy, all of the candidates would definitely be able to reach minor accomplishment within an incense's time. Since everyone would be on the same level, it would be hard to determine who had fared better. Minor accomplishment. Knowing everyone's worry, Pavilion Master Kang chuckled. If you were to know who designed this battle technique, you wouldn't be thinking the same anymore. Who designed the battle technique? Could it be Elder Hong? Elder Hong is the person who has the deepest understanding of battle techniques in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion. In the past 50 years, he has created at least 30 battle techniques. Indeed, the overlapping illusory fist and rippleless consecutive palms originated from him. 3 of my battle techniques also came from him. Just that. Hasn't Elder Hong been in seclusion for the last 10 years? When did he return? I've no idea too. However, if the battle technique really originates from him, putting aside minor accomplishment, even achieving novice within that short period of time will be difficult. Hearing the Pavilion Master's words, the crowd suddenly remembered a legendary figure. That's right. The one who created the battle technique was Elder Hong. Pavilion Master Kang chuckled as he uncovered the mystery plaguing everyone's mind. For the past 10 years, Elder Hong has been in seclusion to develop this technique, and a few days ago, he finally succeeded in refining it. Given the length of time he spent on it, the complexity of it is imaginable. Based on the combined evaluation of me and the other elders, we've deemed it to have at least reached the top of Spirit Intermediate Tier. A battle technique at the top of Spirit Intermediate Tier? Impressive. Everyone gasped in shock. Even a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle expert would find it hard to comprehend a battle technique of this level, let alone the candidates participating in the selection round. Alright, I've said all that has to be said. Now, allow me to invite Elder Hong up to explain the rules of the test. He will be assessing the candidates personally. Pavilion Master Kang smiled. Looking around the crowd, he suddenly froze. Elder Hong, hold it for a moment. Where are you intending to go? Tracing Pavilion Master Kang's gaze, everyone saw an elder who had unknowingly reached the entrance of the hall. He was just a step away from leaving the compound. Cough cough. I'm just walking about. Seeing that everyone's attention was on him, the elder hurriedly stopped and his face turned scarlet. The 4th test is about to begin. Pavilion Master Kang hurried over and pulled him back. Elder Hong had a very stifled expression on his face. Pavilion Master, why don't you conduct the test instead? He had agreed to conducting the test confidently previously, but after seeing the awful state the previous 3 elders were in, he hesitated. That lad was truly sinister. Who knew what kind of peculiarity would happen to him if he were to assess him? He didn't want the reputation he had accrued to collapse because of this single incident. How can I? You were the one who developed the battle technique, not to mention, you have already achieved major accomplishment in it. Other than you, who else is qualified to assess them? Pavilion Master Kang said. This battle technique was developed from Elder Hong, and he had reached major accomplishment in it as well. Other than him, no one else was qualified to conduct the test. At the very least, Pavilion Master Kang didn't think he was. Elder Hong hesitated. Don't worry, it's just an incense's time. Even the most talented genius will only be able to reach novice in that period of time. There won't be any problem, so rest assured. Knowing what Elder Hong was worried about, Pavilion Master Kang attempted to console him via telepathy. Zhongsha was indeed a disquieting. But battle techniques weren't things that could be mastered in a single breath. He didn't believe that the other party could reach major accomplishment in just an incense's time, thus surpassing the creator, Elder Hong. Thus, there was nothing for Elder Hong to worry about. Alright then, after a further moment of contemplation, Elder Hong felt that Pavilion Master Kang's words were logical and finally walked up the stage. Pavilion Master Kang has briefly introduced the content of the test to you all. I'll now announce the rules for the test. The battle technique that I'll be imparting is called 9 Swords of Scarlet Lotus. The inspiration behind the technique came from observing the nature of red lotuses. The rules are simple. Later on, I'll impart you the formula for the sword art, and you will be given an incense's time to study and comprehend it. After which, I'll personally test you on your level of comprehension of the technique. Don't worry, your cultivation will not affect your comprehension of the technique. It's determined solely by your talent. As long as you have reached transcendent mortal realm, you will be able to learn and execute it. During the assessment, you'll be crossing blows with me. If you wish, we can compete solely on swordsmanship itself. If you can trade 3 blows with me using the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus, I'll take it as you have reached novice mastery. 6 swords will be taken as initiate mastery, and 9 swords would mean that you have achieved small accomplishment. And if you can trade 10 blows with me, you will be considered to have reached major accomplishment. Elder Hong explained the rules. In truth, it was a bit similar to the cultivation test in the second round. However, in this test, one could only use the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus. If one of the competitors used any other technique, they would be deemed to have failed. An incense's time was roughly 15 minutes, and in this short period of time, it would be difficult to even finish browsing through the battle technique, let alone comprehend and utilize it in a real battle. Compared to the previous 3, the difficulty of this test was truly immense. To ensure fairness, the examination will be held in another chamber. I'll head in right now, and you each can enter one by one. At which, Elder Hong paused for a moment before continuing, how about I decide on a sequence for you all to avoid contention? Du Hu will enter first, followed by Luo Shi, Feng Mosheng, Fu Xiaochen, Zhun Ruohuan, and finally, Zhongshe. Given the peculiarity of Zhongxian, it was best to put him last. Otherwise, if the other party were to run in first, what if he were to lose control of the situation and the test was unable to be carried on like before? All right. Everyone nodded in agreement. Let's begin then. After deciding on the order, Elder Hong took the lead by walking into the room. Du Hu hurriedly followed behind him. An incense's time later, light flickered on the wall and a number appeared on it. 3. To think that Du Hu would be able to comprehend to the level of a novice in such a short period of time. Seeing Ruohuan Gongzi step out from the room, everyone's eyes gathered on the black horse of the selection round. Initially, no one thought well of him. However, after triumphing indisputably over the rest in 3 consecutive tests, no one dared to look down on his capability. Even so, they couldn't help but feel a little doubtful. After all, from the first test, it could be seen that the other party was skilled in spear arts. Learning a sword art all of a sudden should be rather tough for him. Amidst the discussion, Zhongxian stepped into the room. Soon, an incense's time passed. Why is there no number at all? Indeed. Going by the situation with the others, a number should have appeared by now. Regardless of whether he has reached novice or initiate, a result should at least appear. What's happening? The time was up, but not only was the result not reflected, the room was also bizarrely quiet. The master teachers in the hall stared at one another in bewilderment. Going by the precedence of this fellow, even if he were to subdue Elder Hong in a single blow, the crowd wouldn't find it too shocking. But for there to be no results at all, not to mention, no sign of movements in the chamber. What the heck? Could it be that Elder Hong had killed that fellow? Or perhaps that fellow had killed Elder Hong? Really, what is going on? Chapter 542. Elder Hong's terror. Seeing the young man walk in, Elder Hong's mouth twitched. He had witnessed the tragic experiences of the other elders before him, and it had truly left him frightened. The 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus is a technique that I devoted 10 years of my life to create. Even if Pavilion Master Kang were to cultivate it, he could only reach initiate within an incense's time. No matter how talented this fellow is, reaching minor accomplishment should be an impossibility. There's nothing I should be worried about. Elder Hong calmed himself down by consoling him before pointing to the table in front. The manual for the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus is there. You have an incense's time starting from now. After which, he immediately lit the incense beside him and smoke slowly drifted within the room. Zhongxian walked up to the table, touched the manual, and an identical copy appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path. He flipped through the book with his hands, but his consciousness was inside the Library of Heaven's Path 9 Swords of Red Lotus, created by Elder Hong Qin. It consists of a total of 9 movements. Flaws. After reading through the content, a bizarre expression appeared on Zhongxian's face. So many flaws. And they still dare to call it a profound sword art? The sword art before him had actually more than 100 flaws. With so much flaws, how could they dare to call it a profound sword art? Even trying to get him to learn it. It was truly a wonder where this fellow got his confidence from. But thinking about it, Zhongxian soon realized that he might be underestimating the difficulty of creating a sword art. Most battle techniques had been passed down through innumerable generations and undergone the refinement of many predecessors, thus reducing the number of flaws in it. Given that this sword art had just been created, it was natural for there to be so many flaws. Heaven's Path Sword Art, Fuse. With a thought, Heaven's Path Sword Art and the many sword art secret manuals that Zhongxian had obtained before flew out and fused together with this book. A new 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus appeared. Zhongxian hurriedly flipped through it. Soon, he shook his head. He had too few books on spirit intermediate tier sword arts. The sword arts he had gathered before were too basic to complement such a profound sword art. Making an analogy, no matter how good a lump of feces was, it could never match the value of gold. That was an innate difference in their nature. No matter how accurate the concepts contained within these basic sword art manuals were, they were still unable to make up for the qualitative difference with the spirit intermediate tier sword art. There are still more than 30 flaws. After fusing the book, Zhongxian was in tears. Ever since his transmigration, he had never cultivated a cultivation technique or battle technique that had flaws. This had made him a perfectionist when it came to those. Even for the red dust heaven ascending steps which had 3 flaws, he'd had to muster up his courage before cultivating it. Yet, this sword art before him had more than 30 flaws. He really couldn't bring himself to cultivate it. It was just like how a person whose taste buds is accustomed to the delicacies of a 5-star chef couldn't possibly get used to roadside stalls. But if he didn't cultivate this technique, he would fail the test. In a moment, he fell into a dilemma. On the other hand, Elder Hong's face was gradually turning red, and it seemed as though left to be, he would explode soon. Even though he didn't wish to lose the reputation he had accrued in the earlier part of his life to this fellow, he was still determined to remain professional in this test. Thus, he had been secretly assessing the other party ever since he picked up the book. And the other party's actions made him tempted to rush forward and tear the other party apart. He created this 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus by observing the life cycle of a red lotus, and it spent him an entire 10 years to master the technique. He was proud to say that this was one of the strongest battle technique available in Myriad Kingdom City, and he knew that it would definitely be passed on from generation to generation for innumerable years to come. Yet, the other party simply flipped through it swiftly as soon as he picked it up. It was clear that the other party didn't have the intention to study it properly at all. Not only so, his face alternated between a frown and a conflicted expression. What the heck was that? You look as though you had met with a huge pile of feces and you are about to puke at any moment. The heck? Was the technique that I created so repulsive that you would barf? Infuriated by the other party's reaction, Elder Hong was about to blow up. He had imagined many possibilities the other party might perhaps reach consummation within an incense's time, or perhaps, refuse to cultivate it altogether. But one thing he had never dreamed of was the other party being on the verge of vomiting upon browsing through the manual. This is a top-notch technique among spirit intermediate tier battle techniques. Even Pavilion Master Kang and the other elders were filled with praises for it. What are you trying to say by those reaction? Just as he was seething with rage, the young man before him shut his eyes tightly and clenched his jaws. With an expression reminiscent of a soldier marching to his death, he said, "Forget it, if I have to die, so be it. At most, I'll just never use this technique after cultivating it." Elder Hong couldn't hold himself back anymore. He dashed up to the other party and bellowed, "Zhongshe, what do you mean by that?" On the other hand, Zhongxian was just about to cultivate when the elder suddenly rushed up to him and yelled furiously in his face. Bewildered, Zhongxian stared at the other party doubtfully and asked, "What's wrong? Does the sword art I created disgust you so much?" Elder Hong immediately questioned the other party. "Actually, it's not entirely disgust but that there was simply too many flaws in them. I don't really want to cultivate it." Zhongxian shook his head. Hearing those words, Elder Hong felt so enraged that he was about to go mad. If someone were to ask you such a question, no matter how much you hate the other party, in view of the other party's pride, you should at least deny it or compliment him a little. But this fellow actually just admitted to it straight. Not entirely disgust. In other words, my technique does disgust you. Too many flaws. Too many your head. Do you know how much effort I put into creating this battle technique? For 10 years, I skipped meals and barely rested, all in hopes of creating a mighty technique that would awe the world. Yet, you said that there are too many flaws in my technique. May I know what flaws there are in my sword art? Harumphing coldly, Elder Hong suppressed his rage in fear that he might just kill the other party in a moment of rashness. You're seeking my guidance? Fine, I'll point them out to you then. Look carefully. I don't have much time, so I'll only say them once. Placing his hands behind his back, Zhongxian nodded and strolled around the room slowly. I'll first talk about the first movement of your 9 swords, blooming of the Scarlet Lotus. This technique consists of a total of 81 transformations, and its might is indeed extraordinary. However, to stab one's sword out from one's waist while driving one's zhenqi through the Huanggu and Wangchang acupoints is a move that will inhibit one's flow of zhenqi in itself, thus severely limiting one's strength. If, at that moment, I were to use a weapon, say an ordinary stick, to strike your Huihai acupoint, how would you deal with it? Strike my Huihai acupoint. Upon hearing those words, the movements involved in the blooming of the Scarlet Lotus appeared in his mind and he abruptly stiffened. The blooming of a Scarlet Lotus was a very beautiful phenomenon. As though reflecting that, this move was particularly eye-catching. Using this move, one would attack one's opponent through a violent surge of sword qi. Indubitably, it was a powerful move. However, it had a few fatal flaws, and Huihai acupoint was one of them. Putting aside a wooden stick, if one were to just touch it with one's finger, the entire sword art would fall apart. One would find himself incapable of exerting any might at all. Even he had overlooked this flaw, and yet, the other party noticed it just by flipping through it. But so what if you know that my Huihai acupoint is my weakness? A sword art prides itself on its speed. By the time you can react, I would have already released 5 strikes. How do you intend to cope with that? Elder Hong argued. There was no cultivation technique or sword art that was without flaws. While it is true that the blooming of the Scarlet Lotus had a fatal flaw, it would be impossible to exploit it under the barrage of attacks. Released 5 strikes. You're wrong. What if, at the very start, I were to move forward 3 steps to strike your Hong Hai, turn around to strike your Luo Qiao, and take 3 side steps to strike your Fujiang? After striking these 3 of your acupoints, do you think you could dodge my attack on your Huihai? Zhongxian said nonchalantly. If you were to strike my Hong Hai, I would twist my sword to block it and retreat a step backward. Then, when you stuck my Luo Qiao, I would have to quickly withdraw my offense to defend myself, thus causing a sudden stoppage in my flow of zhenqi, making it impossible for me to launch any sword qi. Then, when you stuck my Fujiang, if I were to attempt to dodge it, my Huihai would surely be unguarded. Why you? Elder Hong analyzed the scenario and initially, he didn't think much of it. However, the more he thought about, the paler his face became, and he started to tremble in shock. If it were a real battle, if his opponent were to strike at these 3 points consecutively, his blooming of the Scarlet Rose would immediately fall apart. Not only would he be unable to hurt the other party, he would even suffer severe damage from the backlash of his zhenqi. Just by stabbing at 3 perfectly ordinary locations, his zhenqi would be inhibited and he would suffer severe damage from his own sword art. This is only the first move. Your second move, Radiance of the Scarlet Lotus, is filled with innumerable flaws. Against this move, even without a weapon, I can charge straight toward your Zhonggong and strike your Ruohai. You would then be forced to retreat, and the rest would be easy, Zhongxian continued. After learning of the flaws from the Library of Heaven's Path, along with Zhongxian's deep knowledge of sword arts, finding a counter for them was quite an easy task. Elder Hong unconsciously took a step back. The second step, Radiance of the Scarlet Lotus, was a long-ranged attack. It looked powerful, but in truth, it would leave one vulnerable to close-range attacks. As long as an enemy were to charge in at this moment to strike one's Zhonggong and Ruohai, one's Zhenqi would definitely be jolted, thus countering the sword art. In the first move, the enemy would at least still have to stab 4 locations, but for this, 2 moves were sufficient to render him completely powerless. How in the world? Was the sword art he created really that worthless? Wait a moment. Under the assault of my sword chi, how could you have the time to possibly get close to me and make so many moves? After contemplating over it for a moment, Elder Hong's eyebrows shot up. What the other party said was all theory. In a real battle, given how fast his sword art was, how could the other party possibly have the time and opportunity to strike him consecutively? No time. Zhong Xian shook his head. Take a good look then. Zhong Xian's body swayed, leaving behind an afterimage on the spot. In the blink of an eye, he had already traveled to the 3 locations and tapped on them with his fingers consecutively. The 3 fingers struck the acupoints that he had spoken of accurately. This. Upon seeing this move, Elder Hong's body convulsed, and he nearly fell to the floor. The other party's speed and offense were flawless. If he had really used the sword art previously and the other party launched such a counter, he would surely be defeated utterly in the blink of an eye. Unless he abandoned the technique and dealt with the other party through his absolute might. Otherwise, with just swordsmanship alone, he would be defeated thoroughly, perhaps even suffering grievous wounds in the process. Cold sweat dripped down his back. Having created so many battle techniques, this 9 Swords of the Scarlet Lotus was actually the one he prided himself the most on. He thought that this technique would have him unrivaled in the myriad kingdom city. He never expected his 10 years of hard work to be so worthless. Zhongshe, may I know if there's a way to complete this sword art of mine? Clasping his fist, Elder Hong bowed deeply, a bow that only a student would make to his teacher. Chapter 543. Forfeit. While the duo was discussing about sword art, everyone outside was panicking. Pavilion Master Kang, Zhongshe has already been inside for 2 hours now. Do you think it is possible that Elder Hong killed him due to a moment of rage? Su She asked anxiously. It had been 2 hours since Zhong Xian entered the chamber, but not only was there no result, there didn't seem to be any movement within as well. No one knew what was going on inside, and a tense atmosphere seemed to fill the room. There's no need to worry. Even if they were to quarrel, as long as one side makes a move, the number of blows should appear on the screen. Given that no number has appeared yet, it could only mean that they haven't come to blows yet. While consoling Su She, Pavilion Master Kang also frowned in confusion. Even if Zhong Xian were to fool about, Elder Hong should possess some self-restraint. After all, how could a person who has already lived for a century possibly lay his hands on a junior in front of so many master teachers? Besides, as long as one side made a move, a number would surely appear on the screen. Currently, there was no movement whatsoever, as though the duo had fallen into a deep sleep inside the chamber. What was going on? Pavilion Master, why don't you go in to take a look? Ling Shi turned to look at him and asked. It wasn't a solution to be waiting out here for them. If the Pavilion Master were to take a look, they would at least know what was going on inside. All right. After a moment of hesitation, Pavilion Master Kang thought that it was reasonable and nodded his head. You all remain here, I'll go in alone. This way, it'll be easier for me to deal with anything that occurs. Su She and Ling Shi nodded their heads. Pavilion Master Kang took in a deep breath, and just as he was about to push the door open and enter, Jia. The door opened, and Zhong Xian and Elder Hong walked out side by side. The attire of the both were still tidy and the both of them had a smile on their faces. There didn't seem to be the slightest hostility between them. Dumbfounded, everyone stared at one another blankly. In the end, after an entire 2 hours, the two of you didn't fight at all. If you two aren't going to fight, why don't you all just come out? Aren't you two just wasting our time? Elder Wu, Elder Bai, and Elder Yun also stared at one another in bewilderment. Given their experience, they felt that even if the both of them didn't fight, Elder Hong would still be left in an unseemly state. They had never expected for the both of them to leave from chamber together with a bright smile on their face. Did Zhong She accidentally knock his head on something? After leaving them in such a tragic state, he actually spared Elder Hong. The trio felt a little doubtful at this situation. Elder Hong, this. Pavilion Master Kang started to ask with a doubtful expression. Oh, it's nothing. Elder Hong shook his head. He turned to glance at the young man before him, and even until now, the shock and admiration he felt for the latter hadn't faded yet. He thought that deciphering the flaws of two of his moves would be the limit of this fellow, but after a comprehensive discussion did he realize that the other party's comprehension of cultivation had already reached an unbelievable level. Just a casual pointer from him could induce a qualitative leap in one's strength. The 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus which he had prided himself on turned out to be full of flaws. It was a decent technique against ordinary cultivators of his level, but against true experts, it would surely crumble swiftly. If he were to use this technique to challenge others, he would probably die from the backlash of his own sword art before injuring his opponent. To die from the backlash of a battle technique he created himself. If word were to spread out, he would become a laughingstock for innumerable years to come. His reputation that he had built up for himself with great difficulty would fall apart immediately. Knowing this, Elder Hong humbly sought the other party's guidance for 2 hours, and under the other party's pointers, his comprehension of the sword art improved greatly. If he were given some more time, he was confident he could create an even more perfect and powerful ultimate technique. Nothing. Then, what is the result of the selection round? Seeing that the other party wasn't willing to speak any further, Pavilion Master Kang could only turn the topic back to the selection round. I'll announce the results now. Nodding his head, Elder Hong smiled. These are the results of all of the candidates after my assessment. Luo Shi and Du Hu, having dealt 3 blows, are in 5th place. Feng Moshing and Fu Xiaochen, having dealt 5 blows, are in 3rd place. Zhun Ruohuan, having dealt 6 blows, is in 2nd place. And in 1st place is Zhongshe. Zhongshe is in 1st place. He's in 1st place again. I thought that they didn't even exchange blows. Hearing this conclusion, everyone was taken aback. The results of Zhun Ruohuan and the other candidates were clear to the eye of everyone here. On the other hand, not a single number appeared in the midst of Zhongshe's test. How did he ended up being placed first? I can't accept this. Ruohuan Gongzi stepped forward. If the other party had shown a result far above his, he would have conceded. But there was clearly no result at all. To declare the other party to be in 1st place without even competing at all, wasn't this a breach of fairness? It was just like he had scored 99 marks in an exam. If his rival had scored 100 marks, he would have conceded defeat. But the other party didn't even take the test at all. On what rights should he be placed first? You cannot accept it. Elder Hong frowned. That's right. I managed to comprehend the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus to initiate mastery, trading 6 blows with Elder. I would like to ask that given that Elder has assessed him as the 1st place, how far has he reached in the comprehension of 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus? Has he reached minor accomplishment? At this point, Ruohuan Gongzi looked at the young man in the distance and gritted his teeth. I don't believe that you can reach minor accomplishment in that battle technique within an incense's time. Unless you fight with me now and defeat me with your sword art. Defeat you? Zhong Xian shook his head. Forget it, I don't have the interest of bullying others. The heck? Isn't he being too arrogant? Hearing those words, the crowd stared at one another. No matter what, Ruohuan Gongzi was a 4-star master teacher, a transcendent mortal 4-dan expert. Not to mention, he specialized in swordsmanship as well. Yet, the other party actually said that he didn't want to bully him. As a fellow who specialized in wielding spears, aren't you afraid that your teeth might fall off from all that bragging? You. Ruohuan Gongzi's face reddened in anger. If you don't wish to compete with me, so be it. As long as you declare that you have comprehended the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus to minor accomplishment within an incense's time, I'll admit defeat immediately. Master teachers valued trust and honor a lot. If the other party were to lie in front of such a huge crowd, his reputation would definitely drop to the gutters. Minor accomplishment. Zhong Xian shook his head. I didn't even learn a single move from the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus, so how could I have possibly reached minor accomplishment? You didn't learn a single move. Not only was Ruo Huan Gongzi stunned, the crowd was also dumbfounded. Didn't even learn a single move. Then on what rights was he declared to be in first place? Wasn't this bias a little too extreme and obvious? Pavilion Master Kang, Su Shu, and the others were completely bewildered as well. They had known Elder Hong for so many years, so they knew very well how upright of a person he was. It was impossible for him to take sides for such a matter. But since Zhongshe didn't learn the technique at all, what right did he have to be in first place? This was a test that affected one's candidacy for the master-teacher tournament. Wasn't this making the matter too lightly? Could it be that Elder Hong has accepted Zhongshe as his student? In order to allow the other party to join the tournament, he intentionally went easy on the latter. But Elder Hong isn't such a person. But if that isn't the case, why did the both of them remain in the room for more than 2 hours, and despite the fact that Zhongshe hasn't even learned a single movement, he was declared first place? The crowd fell into an uproar. Zhongshe and Elder Hong initially didn't know one another, but everyone saw the smile on their faces as they left the chamber side by side. No one would believe it if they were to claim that there was nothing between them. Pavilion Master Kang turned to Elder Hong and asked, "Elder Hong, what's going on?" All gazes also gathered on Elder Hong, curious to see how he would reply. "Accept him as my student." Hearing everyone's conjecture, Elder Hong's lips twitched. "All of your imaginations sure are wild. Even if I want to accept him as my student, I need to have the capability to back that up first." Shaking his head, Elder Hong came clean with everyone. "There's no need for you all to guess any further. I'm the one who wants to acknowledge Zhongshe as my teacher, but he won't agree to it." "Acknowledge Zhongshe as your teacher? And he didn't agree to it? Elder Hong, are you pulling our legs?" Everyone's mouth was widened large, and a bizarre silence loomed in the hall. Elder Hong was known to be the #1 specialist in terms of battle techniques and cultivation techniques in Myriad Kingdom City. He had created innumerable ultimate techniques that many master teachers cultivate. In fact, it could be said that at least half of the master teachers at the hall now could be considered as half a student of his. Yet, such an influential figure actually wished to acknowledge that fellow as his teacher. If that was the case, then wasn't a half of the people in this hall that fellow's grand student? And, what that shocked them more was that this fellow actually rejected it. "Are you serious? Zhongshe possesses outstanding talent, and his comprehension of cultivation has reached an astounding level that one can do nothing but simply look up to. Even though he didn't learn the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus that I created, his understanding of it is so deep that I can't even hope to match up to him. I've sought his guidance for the past 2 hours and benefited greatly from his teachings." Elder Hong replied gravely. "Sought Zhongshe's guidance?" Everyone stared at one another, and for a moment, their brains were unable to process what was going on. "Didn't you spend 10 years creating the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus and even reached major accomplishment in it? Yet, toward a fellow who only learned it for an incense's time, you sought the other party's guidance, and even benefited greatly from it, wanting to take him as your teacher. Why does it sound like a huge joke?" Elder Wu, Elder Bai, and the others widened their eyes in shock. Initially, when they saw the two coming out with smiles, they thought that Zhongxian had changed his nature. But from the looks of it now, they were being too naive. It was not that he didn't do anything, but he had captured Elder Hong's heart. At least they were only injured. On the other hand, Elder Hong, if he were to really acknowledge Zhongshe as his teacher, his reputation and standing would vanish in an instant. This test assesses your comprehension of cultivation. Within an incense's time, Ruo Huan Gongzi managed to trade 6 blows with me. On the other hand, in the same time period, Zhongshe was able to offer me valuable guidance. Even if he didn't learn the 9 swords of Scarlet Lotus, my judgment of putting him in first place shouldn't be a problem at all, right? Elder Hong stared at Jun Ruohuan coldly. This. Ruohuan Gongzi's body twitched, and he felt like he would cry at any moment now. Given Elder Hong's standing, he wouldn't stoop down to the level of lying. In other words, there was a very good chance that what the other party was saying was the truth. He was gleeful at having reached initiate mastery, thinking that he was a great genius. On the other hand, The other party had managed to understand the technique thoroughly and even became a teacher for the creator of the battle technique. The heck? Where did this monster pop out from? Could that monster still be considered as a human like that? It was no wonder the other party said that he didn't want to bully him. For him, who he could only withstand 6 blows from Elder Hong, to go up against someone who could become a teacher for Elder Hong, that would indeed be a terribly one-sided match. Since the results are out, let's proceed on to the next test then. Seeing that his student was on the verge of going insane from the mental blows he was suffering, Pavilion Master Kang hurriedly interjected and changed the topic. This is the last test for the selection round. It'll be on pointing out flaws in others' cultivation process and offering pointers for improvement. But halfway through Pavilion Master Kang's words, a voice suddenly echoed. Turning around, he saw Zhong Xian looking at him. I'll forfeit this round. Chapter 544. Insufficient supporting occupations. Forfeit. Everyone turned to look at Zhong Xian. As the person who had managed to take first place in the first 4 rounds, he was truly the black horse of the selection round. Why did he suddenly forfeit at the last moment? You've already participated in the first 4 tests, this is the last one. Su She hurriedly advised him anxiously. The purpose of this selection round is to pick out 2 candidates with the best results to participate in the Master Teacher Tournament. Given my previous results, even if I don't participate in the 5th round, I'll still be in first place. Since there's no reason for me to continue on, I might as well forfeit, Zhong Xian said impassively. Besides, there's not much point in me getting the first place all the time. Not much point in getting the first place all the time? It must be exhilarating to say those words. But what Zhong Shi said makes sense. Having taken first place in the previous 4 rounds, he has 24 points at present. On the other hand, the current second place, Ruo Huan Gongzi, only has 18 points. After which is Fu Xiaochen with 15 points, Feng Morsheng with 13 points, Luo Shu with 10 and Du Hu with 7. Even if Zhong Shi were to forfeit this round and end up in the last place, he would still have 25 points. There is no one who can catch up to him already. So, it shouldn't be a problem for him to forfeit at this point. To be able to be the overall champion despite skipping the final round. Incredible. Hearing the explanation, everyone understood his reasoning. Since his position was already stable, there was indeed no need for him to waste time on the last test. Coming to a realization, Pavilion Master Kang traded glances with Su She and smiled bitterly. As expected of Zhong Shi, he sure was imposing. Other people had to give their all for every single test, whereas this fellow's victory was already decided in the 4th round. Men are indeed not born equal. Since that's the case, then so be it. Sweeping past the other candidates with his gaze, Pavilion Master Kang saw that they were reluctant to compete with such a monster as well. Thus, he shook his head and continued, however, Zhong Shi, you should remain in the hall for now. After the last test, we'll explain the details regarding the Master Teacher Tournament to you. Zhong Zorn nodded his head. It didn't take long for the results of the round to emerge. Ruo Huan Gongzi managed to clinch first place in the last round, thus winning the other slot for the Master Teacher Tournament. Alright. Now that the selection round is over, I'll officially declare that Zhong Shi and Jun Ruo Huan shall represent the Myriad Kingdom Alliance to participate in the Master Teacher Tournament. Since the results were clear, Pavilion Master Kang began declaring the final verdict. Pavilion Master, hold on for a moment. But halfway through his words, Fu Xiaochen stepped forward. I don't deny Zhong Shi's capability. However, if my memory doesn't fail me, the minimum requirement for participating in the Master Teacher Tournament is to be a 3-star Master Teacher. Given that Zhong Shi is only a 2-star Master Teacher, I fear that he won't even pass the qualification check if he were to participate in the tournament. Pavilion Master Kang frowned. The other party was right. There was indeed a prerequisite for one's Master Teacher rank to participate in the Master Teacher Tournament. And 3-star was the minimum requirement. If one couldn't even reach such a level, how could he possibly triumph over the others in the tournament? Even though Zhong Xian had displayed an outstanding performance in the selection round, in the end, he was only a 2-star Master Teacher. He was still a way off from meeting the minimum participation requirement. Given how Zhongshe passed all of the tests so easily, it wouldn't be a problem even if he were to apply for the rank of a 4-star master teacher straight away. Su She interjected. Even Ruohuan Gongzi, a 4-star master teacher, wasn't a match for Zhongshe at all. There should be no difficulty for the latter to apply for a 4-star master teacher rank at all. Zhongshe's capability is indeed on par with 4-star master teachers. Even without undergoing a 4-star master teacher examination, it wouldn't be a problem for his promotion application to pass straight. However, the requirements to becoming a 4-star master teacher dictates that one has to have at least 4 4-star supporting occupations. I'm afraid that with such a requirement, he isn't qualified as a 4-star master teacher, Fu Xiaochen said. If Zhongshe hadn't appeared, he and Ruohuan Gongzi would definitely have been the candidates for the tournament. Given that his slot was being snatched away from him, he had to at least do something to vie it back. And the other party's supporting occupations was a huge flaw he could pick at. In his view, no matter how skilled Zhongshe was, given his age, there should be a limit to what he was capable of. After all, he couldn't possibly be skilled in everything. That's true. Supporting occupations also require a long duration of studying to accrue knowledge and advance. Everyone fell silent. Even Su She was unable to say a single word about it. That was true. Zhongshe's talent and capability was clear to everyone's eyes, there was nothing that could dispute it. But to become a 4-star master teacher was far more difficult than that. Supporting occupations were of vital importance as well. Even a 3-star master teacher would require 3 3-star supporting occupation. Just like with soul depth, this was a fundamental requirement. Zhongshe's proficiency regarding painting has definitely reached a minimum of 4-star. It won't be a problem for me to apply the rank for him at the Painter Guild. Elder Yun stepped forward. Given how the other party was able to easily produce a 6th-level painting, his proficiency in painting was definitely higher than him. Applying for the position of a 4-star painter wasn't a problem at all. But that's only one occupation, Fu Xiaochen said. Even if he were to be assessed as a 4-star painter, that would only make one occupation. He was still lacking in 2. By no means was it easy to pick up a supporting occupation, not to mention, they had to reach 3-star for him to qualify for the 3-star master teacher rank. Zhongshe, do you have any occupations that have reached a minimum of 3-star? Pavilion Master Kang asked. Zhongxian was just about to speak when an apprentice suddenly barged in. Pavilion Master. Hall Master Han from the Beast Hall requests to enter. Hall Master Han? What is here for? Pavilion Master Kang was taken aback. The head of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Beast Hall, Han Chong, wasn't really on close terms with him. Why would he suddenly visit the Master Teacher Pavilion? Invite him in. Even though he was doubtful, he chose to invite the other party in for the time being. Although the Master Teacher Pavilion wielded greater authority than the Beast Hall, the might of the Beast Hall wasn't to be underestimated. In any case, even if he didn't intend to maintain friendly relations with the other party, it would still be wise to avoid making such an enemy. Yes. The apprentice departed, and a moment later, 2 elders entered the room. Turning his head around, Zhongxian saw 2 people entering. One of them was Hall Master Han, whom he met at Coke's Ridge, while the other one was Hall Master Sai from the Appraiser Hall. Greetings to Pavilion Master Kang and the elders of Master Teacher Pavilion. They were surprised to see that there were so many people in the hall. However, as influential people themselves, they had braved through many storms, so they managed to maintain their grace as they clasped their fists in greeting. After trading a few pleasantries, Hall Master Kang asked doubtfully, "May I know the reason behind Hall Master Han and Hall Master Sai's visit?" "In truth, I've come here to look for Zhongshe." Hall Master Han chuckled. "I heard from Hall Master Sai that he was heading here, so I rushed all the way here." "Zhongshe?" Pavilion Master Kang blinked in surprise. The others also turned their gazes over. "Is there a reason why you're looking for me?" Zhongxian was also perplexed by the situation before him. He had only met the other party once and there wasn't too deep of a relationship between them. Why would the other party come to find him? "Oh, it's actually like that. I've reported Zhongsha's feat of taming the demon-sank beast to the headquarters, and they decided to make an exception to promote Zhongsha as a 4-star beast tamer. Thus, I've come here to deliver your emblem to you." Hall Master Han smiled. Judging by how Zhongsha was able to tame the demon-sank beast with just a single word, his capability in beast taming had already far surpassed him. As such, he informed the headquarters of the matter as soon as he returned. After receiving the reply earlier today, he immediately rushed over to look for Zhongsha. Under normal circumstances, beast tamer, as an occupation of the upper 9 paths, had strict requirements of one's cultivation. To reach 4-star, one's cultivation had to reach Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan at minimum. This was truly a rare exception. 4-star beast tamer? Zhongsha is actually a 4-star beast tamer? Hearing Hall Master Han's words, everyone broke into an uproar. It was right after someone remarked that Zhongsha was lacking in supporting occupations when the other party had a 4-star beast tamer emblem delivered to him. Along with the painter occupation, he had 2 occupations down already. "Thank you." Not expecting the other party to request for a 4-star beast tamer emblem for him, Zhongxian nodded his head. Right when he received the emblem, the same apprentice from before rushed in and reported, "Hall Master, Guild Leader Zheng and Guild Leader Meng from Honghai City's Formation Guild and Physician Guild request to enter. Invite them in." Pavilion Master Kang waved his hands. Soon, the duo appeared in the hall. Formation Master and Physician were another 2 of the most prestigious occupations of the upper 9 paths that were inferior in no way to beast tamer. The simultaneous arrival of the 2 guild leaders had left all of the other master teachers staring at one another in bewilderment. "May I know why the 2 of you are here?" Pavilion Master Kang clasped his fist and asked doubtfully. "I'm here to look for Zhongsha," Guild Leader Zheng said. "You're here to look for Zhongsha as well?" Pavilion Master Kang widened his eyes in shock. "That's right." Guild Leader Zheng chuckled. Turning to Zhongxian, he said, "Zhongsha, I've only given you a quasi-4-star Formation Master emblem previously. After you left, I reported this matter to the headquarters and they decided to make an exception to approve you as a 4-star Formation Master." That day, Zhongxian had used a sword, saber, and spear to inscribe a grade 5 formation plate. It was only due to his lacking cultivation that he didn't qualify as a true 4-star Formation Master. As such, he was given a quasi-4-star Formation Master emblem instead. After the matter, Guild Leader Zheng reported the matter to the headquarter, and just a few days before, he received the reply from the headquarter they had decided to make an exception to promote Zhongxian as an official 4-star Formation Master. A 4-star Formation Master as well? Everyone blinked their eyes in disbelief. Another occupation now? But before they could recover from their shock, the elder standing beside Guild Leader Zheng clasped his fist and smiled. "Zhongsha might not recognize me. I am Guild Leader Meng Qi from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Physician Guild. My greetings to Guild Leader Meng." Zhongxian nodded. Zhongsha challenged Tianwu Kingdom's Wall of Dilemma and solved the second princess's innate muscle deficiency affliction. Hall Master Han was also treated by you a while ago. Your mastery in medicine is indeed miraculous. As such, I also made a request to the headquarters and received their approval. Here is your 4-star physician emblem. Guild Master Meng chuckled. Back then, the Myriad Kingdom Alliance had made Zhongxian an elder of their guild for having solved the Wall of Dilemma. But it was only today that they finally met the person in question. He was indeed young and valiant. There was an extraordinary aura shrouding him. That makes 4 occupations. Hearing Guild Leader Meng's words, everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. This was especially so for Fu Xiaochen. He nearly knocked his head on a wall to kill himself. He had just said that the other party was lacking in supporting occupation when Hall Master Han, Guild Leader Zheng, and Guild Leader Meng walked in personally to deliver his 4-star emblems themselves. Did it need to be so exaggerated? Even if you wanted to slap my face, surely you don't have to do it so quickly. Tears streamed down Fu Xiaochen's face. If only he'd known that the other party was so capable, he would have kept his mouth shut. Just as he was about to suffer a mental breakdown from all those blows, Hall Master Sai's voice sounded, "Upper 9 paths occupations sure are troublesome. You all still need to go through so much trouble request from the headquarter and waiting for a reply before a ranking can be decided. Look at our appraiser hall. We gave Zhongshe his 5-star appraiser emblem immediately after he passed the examination. There's no need to go through so much fuss at all. Here's a 5-star appraiser on top of that. Putong. Fu Xiaochen really collapsed onto the floor this time around. Chapter 545. Yin-Yang Lake occupations of the upper 9 paths are strict on their rankings, and those that they are willing to make an exception for are all, without a doubt, top-notch geniuses. I thought that Zhongshe's capability as a master teacher was already impressive, but to think that he was equally amazing in other occupations as well. Indeed, 3 of the top upper 9 paths occupation actually made an exception and promoted him to 4-star. His talent is no longer something that can be summarized with just genius anymore. That's too formidable. Everyone in the room was stunned. If one were to achieve proficiency far beyond ordinary men in an occupation, one could already be considered as a genius. But the person before them, not only was he young, he actually managed to achieve such astounding proficiency in 5 occupations. Truly, it was a wonder how he studied so much. The crowd couldn't help but feel despair when comparing their achievement to the young man before them. Since the other occupations have made an exception, why can't our master teacher pavilion? Zhongshe's performance should make him more than qualified as a 4-star master teacher, Susha couldn't help but say. Indeed. Lingsha agreed. Given that Zhongshe already had more than 5 4-star occupations, even though his cultivation is lacking, I believe that he is still more than qualified as a 4-star master teacher. Not only must a 4-star master teacher possess 4 4-star supporting occupation, more importantly, one had to possess the cultivation of a transcendent mortal 2 Dan. Even though Zhongshe's cultivation was lacking at the moment, given how the other upper 9 paths occupations were willing to make an exception to grant him a 4-star emblem, how couldn't the respected master teacher pavilion do so as well? This Pavilion Master Kang hesitated. Indeed, since the other occupations were willing to go to such extents, why couldn't the Master Teacher Pavilion do so as well? After a momentary pause, Pavilion Master Kang said, "All right, I'll send a request to the headquarters immediately." Before Pavilion Master Kang could finish his words, Zhongshen abruptly asked, "Hold on a moment. The reason why you can't give me a 4-star Master Teacher emblem straight despite the supporting occupations I have, is it due to my cultivation?" UN. Pavilion Master Kang nodded. "There's no need to go through so much trouble for that. I'll just make a breakthrough on the spot," Zhongshen said. "Make a breakthrough on the spot." Cough cough. Susha and Lingsha were dumbfounded. Even if you were at Transcendent Mortal 1 Dan Prolonged Longevity Realm Pinnacle, it shouldn't be that easy for you to make a breakthrough. After all, to achieve a breakthrough, you have to convert the zhenqi in your body into origin energy to harmonize better with the environment. Zhongshe, there's no need to rush. You must be careful when making a breakthrough into origin energy realm so as to not affect the quality of your origin energy. A higher quality origin energy will prove to be beneficial to your future cultivation. It would be best if you can accumulate some more experience first. Pavilion Master Kang advised. However, before he could finish his words, the young man before him suddenly frowned. Hong Long. A sound reminiscent of an egg cracking sounded from his body. In an instant, the bottleneck which had restrained him suddenly gave way, and a majestic aura gradually emerged from within. Origin Energy Realm. Pavilion Master Kang's body trembled as he swallowed his words. He could clearly feel that the other party had managed to achieve a breakthrough. Others would need to find a quiet and safe place to condition their state before attempting a breakthrough. Yet, this fellow simply did it right after saying he would do so. Do you need to be so savage? After successfully making a breakthrough, Zhongshen said nonchalantly, "All right, there's no need to feel conflicted about it anymore. Since I'm already an origin energy realm cultivator, I've already met the conditions." He was already ready to make a breakthrough to the next realm by the time he was at the Soul Oracle Tomb. Back at Pavilion Master Kang's room, he had gathered sufficient Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan cultivation technique manuals for him to compile the correct Heaven's Path divine art. Under such circumstances, achieving a breakthrough hinged on just a single thought. All right. Seeing that the other party achieved a breakthrough so easily without any hiccups, the entire hall fell silent. Fu Xiaochen trembled violently, unable to utter a single word. Right after he'd doubted the other party's supporting occupation, heads of the upper 9 paths guilds rushed into the hall to present him his emblem. And after which, when he doubted the other party's cultivation, the other party immediately achieved a breakthrough for him. It was truly impossible to speak to someone like that. Otherwise, he would slap your face once every few minutes, and not to mention, it was the type that would leave you tongue-tied and stifled. When everything else was done, the remaining portion was simple. Not too long later, an emblem representing Zhong Xian's identity was presented to him. The current him was an official 4-star master teacher recognized by the Master Teacher Pavilion. Zhongshe and Ruohuan, follow me. I'll tell you too the details of the Master Teacher tournament. When all was done, Pavilion Master Kang beckoned them over. Leaving the hall, the trio entered a room. I believe you all should more or less know some details regarding the Master Teacher tournament, Pavilion Master Kang said. UN. The duo nodded their heads. The Master Teacher Tournament is an event supported by the Huanyu Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. The content of the tournament changes each time, and if one were to get into the top 10, not only would one earn middle-tier spirit stones as a reward, one will even be given an opportunity to study at Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Pavilion Master Kang said. Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Jun Ruohuan's breathing hastened. UN. Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head. Seeing the agitation on the expression of the other two, Zhong Xian was perplexed. Is that academy famous? Famous? Pavilion Master Kang shook his head with a bitter smile. Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy is established in joint by Hongyuan Empire and the 100 or so Tier 2 Empire Master Teacher Pavilions under them. It's a cradle for 4-star master teachers, and its purpose is to accept and groom talented master teachers. 6-star master teachers conduct lessons personally there to answer their queries. If only I could study in there, I would have long become a 5-star master teacher already. A place to groom talented master teachers? Zhong Xian was astounded. His alternate identity, Yang Xian, was mistaken by others as a 6-star master teacher. In truth, he had never seen a master teacher of that tier before. But even so, he knew how fearsome a person who had reached such level would be. If one were to receive the guidance from such a person, one's cultivation and fighting prowess would surely rise by leaps and bounds. Putting everything aside, Mo Hunsheng, who was trapped in the lotus, was just a 6-star soul oracle, but he already possessed such incredible means, so one could only imagine the strength of a master teacher at that level. Originally, I only hoped for our Master Teacher Pavilion to not rank in the bottom few. However, with Zhongshe on our side this time, I hope that you can try to vie for the top 10, Pavilion Master Kang said with a serious expression. Zhong Xian's performance today had awed him. His expectations couldn't help but rise, and a ray of hope emerged within him. It no longer seemed like a dream for the Myriad Kingdom Alliance to get into the top 10. If they were to really get into top 10, then as the Pavilion Master his name would go down into history. Perhaps, he might even get the opportunity to be dispatched to the Huanyu Empire Master Teacher Pavilion, thus receiving even better cultivation resources to reach higher realms. Top 10. Ruohuan Gongzi clenched his fists tightly together. However, top 10 won't be easy at all. Even though the other powers participating in the Master Teacher Tournament have already arrived in the city, they have done well concealing the identity of their participants. Thus, even I haven't managed to gather too much information. Even so, Pavilion Master Kang knew the immense difficulty in doing so. Based on the records in the previous tournaments, one's cultivation will be tested in the tournament as well. It is nearly impossible to get into the top 10 without reaching a cultivation of Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Intermediate Stage. Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Intermediate Stage? Zhong Xian frowned. Indeed. This is why I hope that you can use the next 2 months to work hard on your cultivation. Pavilion Master Kang looked at the duo with glowing eyes. As such, I've decided to bring you two to the Yinyang Lake to cultivate tomorrow. Yinyang Lake? Teacher, do you mean the Yinyang Lake of the Origin Flame Glacier Plain? Ruo Huangongzi hurriedly turned to look at his teacher. That's right. Where else can one find the Yin-Yang Lake other than in the Origin Flame Glacier Plain? Pavilion Master Kang nodded his head. But isn't the Origin Flame Glacier Plain on bad terms with our Myriad Kingdom City? Would they really allow us to use your Yin-Yang Lake? Ruo Huangongzi asked doubtfully. There's no need to worry about that. I've already negotiated the matter with their old ancestor, and as long as you can pass their selection test, you will be allowed to cultivate in the Yin-Yang Lake. The Yin-Yang Lake harnesses the two attributes of yin and yang. On one end is bone-piercing chill, whereas on the other end is searing heat. One will be able to control the energy in one's body by cultivating in it. This makes it easier for one to comprehend higher realms, thus hastening one's rate of cultivation. This is exceptionally useful for those who possess unique constitutions like pure yin and pure yang body, Pavilion Master Kang said. Pure yin and pure yang body. Zhongxian was taken aback. Indeed. The Yin-Yang Lake is divided into yin and yang. It has the effect of stimulating and thus awakening the constitution of those possessing a pure yin or pure yang body, inducing a huge rise in their cultivation. However, it is a pity that those who possess these two constitutions are truly rare, Pavilion Master Kang lamented. This. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Pure yin and pure yang bodies are indeed rare, but Zhao Yue's happened to be the former. Despite only awakening her unique constitution by 20%, she already possessed such formidable might. Since this Yin-Yang Lake was useful to her, perhaps he could bring her along to vie for an opportunity for her. Otherwise, if it came down to it, Zhongxian was willing to give up his own slot for the latter as well. Honestly speaking, Zhongxian didn't really think the Yin-Yang Lake would make much of a difference to him. After all, as long as he was able to form the Heaven's Path divine art and had sufficient spirit stones in his possession, cultivation was as simple as eating and drinking to him. Putting aside transcendent mortal 4 Dan, as long as he had sufficient quantities of the two, reaching transcendent mortal 9 Dan in a day wasn't a problem at all. However, the Yin-Yang Lake is located at the utmost south of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. It's a long distance away, and even riding on a 4 Dan pinnacle aerial spirit beast, just the journey there in itself would take almost a dozen days. If we were to factor in the time required for you to cultivate, the entire trip would take at least 40 days. As such, if you don't have any issue, we'll set off tomorrow morning. After all, we have to make it back here before the Master-Teacher Tournament, Pavilion Master Kang said with a grim expression. No problem. Zhongxian and Ruo Huangongzi nodded their heads. After hearing the mystical effects of the Yin-Yang Lake, Zhongxian was actually rather curious to see it for himself. Also, since it was extremely useful to awakening Zhao Yue's unique constitution, as long as he could vie for an opportunity for her to enter the Yin-Yang Lake, her cultivation might soar by leaps and bounds. All right then. The two of you should return for now to make preparations. We'll meet here tomorrow morning. After Pavilion Master Kang was done with the briefing, he dismissed the two. All right. The duo nodded their heads. Leaving the room, Zhongxian immediately returned back to his residence and called Zhao Yue over. Tomorrow, I'll take you to a place that would be useful in awakening your constitution, so prepare yourself. After which, Zhongxian returned to his room. Given that the trip would take more than a month, the urgent matter at hand for him was to raise his cultivation as soon as possible. For the time being, he should at least try to reach Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle first. Thus, activating the Spirit Gathering formation, he sat down. Flicking his wrist, a middle-tier spirit stone appeared before him. Chapter 546, Elder Hu Gu. Pure Zhenqi seeped through Zhongxian's entire body along his meridians, through his acupoints, headed straight toward his dantian. Driving the transcendent mortal 2 Dan Heaven's Path divine art, Zhongxian fell into a tranquil state, and his aura slowly hiked up. Origin Energy Realm Primary Stage. Origin Energy Realm Intermediate Stage. If someone else were to see his pace of cultivation, they would immediately fall into a frenzy. They had spent innumerable years of hard work just to raise their cultivation, but Zhongxian seemed to do the same as easily as eating and drinking. The concept of difficult and bottleneck didn't seem to apply to him at all. In a luxurious mansion in the Myriad Kingdom city, a young man stood at the entrance of the courtyard, loitering around anxiously. If Zhongxian was here, he would definitely be able to recognize the other party as the wealthy customer who often bought from him, Song Chao. After loitering to and fro for several times, Song Chao couldn't help but turn to the guard at the entrance and ask, "When will Elder come out of his seclusion?" "I've no idea as well. After meeting with Song Shi the previous time, Elder immediately went into seclusion. Since then, he hasn't come out at all," the guard replied. "All right." After obtaining the grade 7 metal coffin, Song Chao immediately rushed to this courtyard to look for the elder, only to learn that the latter was currently in seclusion. Thus, he could only wait for the latter to return. Who knew that this wait would have taken him several days? In any case, he did expect the elder to immerse himself in the research of the soulless metal humanoid after obtaining it. "Forget it, I'll return for now first." Since the other party was in seclusion, it wasn't good for him to simply barge in. Helpless, he decided to leave for now. However, before he barely took a few steps, the door behind him opened. Haha. Turning around, Song Chao saw an old man walking out of the room with a bright smile. He hurried forward and bowed to the latter with clasped fists. Paying respects to Elder Hu. Stroking his beard, Elder Hu said with a smile, "You came at the right time. The soulless metal humanoid you gave me is indeed not bad. After studying for numerous days, I've benefited greatly from it. If I can reach Consonant Spirit Realm because of this, I'll make sure to reward you greatly." Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan Consonant Spirit Realm was a difficult hurdle of the Transcendent Mortal Realm due to how intricately it was tied with the study of souls. He had been trapped in Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Pinnacle for a very long time already. He had tried many ways to achieve a breakthrough, but all of them turned out to be futile. Thus, when Song Chao delivered a soulless metal humanoid to him just a period ago, he immediately studied it intensely as though it was his only lifeline. Soulless metal humanoids were the personal bodyguards of the ancient soul oracles, and the secret behind souls could be uncovered from them. Even though he was still unable to comprehend how these soulless metal humanoids could be formed, he was able to gain a deeper insight into the concept of souls. This would prove to be greatly beneficial to his future breakthrough into the Consonant Spirit Realm. "Elder, you're being too courteous. I'm glad that this artifact is useful to you." Song Chao hurriedly nodded. "UN." Hearing the other party's humble words, Elder Hu nodded his head in satisfaction. "For you to pay me so many visits in the past few days, did something happen?" Even though he was in seclusion, he still maintained some basic awareness of his surroundings. Song Chao hurriedly nodded his head. "I met that person who sold me the soulless metal humanoid just a few days ago. This time, he offered me the grade 7 metal coffin which is used to store soulless metal humanoids. Thinking that it might be beneficial for Elder's study, I bought it down." Grade 7 metal coffin? A coffin used to house soulless metal humanoid? Where is it? Show me. Elder Hu's eyes lit up and his breathing hastened. As he was unable to achieve a breakthrough for such a long period of time, he chose to turn his attention to the study of souls. After years of research, he had learnt quite a bit about the subject. In his research, he had stumbled by the subject of soul oracles and thus, he understood the significance of this coffin. If he had obtained these items earlier, he would have enjoyed a much greater improvement in the past few days. Even if he was still unable to reach Consonant Spirit Realm, his soul would at least become much stronger than before. Yes. Flicking his wrist, a massive coffin appeared before them. It was the coffin that Zhongxian sold to him for 1 middle-tier spirit stone back at the herb garden. To think that it's a grade 7 metal coffin in perfect condition. Seeing the inscriptions on the coffin, Elder Hu's eyes slowly grew brighter and brighter. The soul oracles had entrusted blacksmiths to forge these coffins specially for their soulless metal humanoid, and they had the effect of maintaining a soulless metal humanoid in its peak condition for millenniums to come. Based on the words of the seller, this coffin was the one used to house the soulless metal humanoid in Elder's hand. Song Chao continued. "Oh." Elder Hu nodded his head. After assessing the coffin carefully, he raised his head and said, The person who sold those things to you. Where is he? Did you ask him where he obtained those items from? That. I didn't. Song Chao shook his head. Under the other party's impartation of heaven's will, he would lose all basic critical thinking ability. Every single meeting would only end with him forking out spirit stones. Under such circumstances, how was he supposed to ask anything at all? You didn't ask. Elder Hu frowned. Recalling the words that the young man said that day, Song Chao hurriedly replied, even though I didn't ask, I know that there are at least 3 more of such soulless metal humanoids and grade 7 metal coffins in his possession. In fact, it seems like he even has the higher tier. Crimson metal coffin. Do you mean that shattered by none the lock of crimson metal, undisturbed a rest for 10 millenniums? The coffin that even transcendent mortal 9-dan experts are unable break open, and is used to store a soul oracle's physical body? Elder Whose breathing hastened as his eyes lit up. A grade 7 metal coffin was only a tool used to store soulless metal humanoid. On the other hand, the crimson metal coffin was something that was used to store the body of the soul oracle himself. Even though they were both coffins, the value of the latter was definitely much greater than the former. That fellow actually had such good stuff. Yes. Song Chao nodded his head. Great. Where is he? Is he selling that crimson metal coffin? What does he want for it? Elder Who hurriedly asked. That. He intends to sell the crimson metal coffin, just that. I didn't have sufficient money on me then, so I couldn't afford it. Putting everything aside, just this grade 7 metal coffin is already worth an entire middle-tier spirit stone. Song Chao said. The grade 7 metal coffin is the work of a 4-star craftsman, and it has the effect of maintaining the physical condition of a soulless metal humanoid for millenniums to come. Not only is it not expensive, it is in fact rather cheap. Not bad. Elder Who nodded his head. Given that it was the work of a 4-star craftsman, and considering the precious materials involved and the secret of soul oracles hidden within it, a middle-tier spirit stone was indeed relatively cheap in comparison. This was an extremely fair price. Hearing that he made a fair trade, Song Chao heaved a sigh of relief before asking, so, does Elder Who intend to buy it? This is a rare opportunity, we have to obtain it. However, you should also know that even though I am an elder, my stipends are limited. Since a grade 7 metal coffin is worth a middle-tier spirit stones, nothing needs to be said about the crimson metal coffin. Even I am unable to fork out such a price. Even though Elder Who was excited, he didn't allow it to get ahead of himself. The annual stipends of an elder wasn't unlimited. The number of middle-tier spirit stones he had at hand was extremely limited. The elder couldn't help but ask, right, have you tried buying it with tutelage jade tokens? Tutelage jade token? The person selling it is a master teacher himself, and his rank can only be higher than mine. He won't want the jade tokens. Song Chao smiled bitterly. Back then, when he intended to buy the rousing from the drunken dreams on the auction, the other party refused to sell the work for anything other than spirit stones. After learning that Zhong Shu was the seller, he immediately understood the reason. The other party was a master teacher himself, and chances were that he had an even more formidable teacher above him. While tutelage jade tokens were incomparably valuable to ordinary cultivators, to master teachers like them, their value was negligible. It was just like how an owner of a gold mine wouldn't want to trade his possessions just to earn back gold. Master teacher? Elder Who was taken back. If the other party wasn't a master teacher, there was a variety of means they could use guiding the other party or accepting the other party as his student. However, given that the other party was a master teacher like them, the things that they could do both on the surface and beneath the surface would become terribly limited. The Master Teacher Pavilion was an organization to govern and protect master teachers. If they were to be caught doing harm on the other party for greed, their entire sect would suffer the wrath of the headquarters. After a moment of hesitation, Elder Who said, "Never mind, where is he now? I'll talk to him and ask him for the price of the crimson metal coffin. This way, I can make preparations." The safest and only viable method available was to buy it. It was fortunate that the other party had the intentions to sell it. He's currently in the guest residence of Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Alliance head residence, Song Chao said. While he had been visiting Elder Hu the past few days, he had been keeping a lookout for Zhongxian's whereabouts. After leaving the herb garden, Zhongxian didn't hide his whereabouts. Given how even Su Shi and the others were able to easily hear of the other party's whereabouts, it wasn't too difficult for him to do so as well. All right then. Prepare the mounts, we'll head over. Elder Hu nodded his head. Who? Zhongxian finally came to a stop. There isn't sufficient spiritual energy. Zhongxian thought that a middle-tier spirit stone should be more than sufficient for him to reach Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle. But from the looks of it now, he was still underestimating his spiritual energy consumption rate. Along with the rise in his cultivation, the spiritual energy he needed to make a breakthrough was increasing exponentially. A middle-tier spirit stone only could fuel him up to Origin Energy Realm Advanced Stage. He was still quite a distance away from reaching Pinnacle. I'll need at least 2 more middle-tier spirit stone before reaching Pinnacle. Making a rough calculation, Zhongxian shook his head. The spirit stone he had obtained from Hall Master Han was used up in the midst of cultivating his soul, and this spirit stone turned out to be insufficient to raise his Junshi cultivation as well. Where was he supposed to find more middle-tier spirit stones? He thought that he could be considered wealthy already. In the end, as soon as he started cultivating, he ended up being plagued by the issue of lack of spirit stones once again. On top of that, the soul rouse grass also requires huge amount of energy to bloom as well. Based on Zhongxian's estimations, the energy required was much greater than the amount needed for him to reach Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle. I really have to find some way to earn some money. Rubbing his glabella, Zhongxian stood up. Earning money. It was easier said than done. What was he supposed to do about it? There were only a few middle-tier spirit stones in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's Alliance head residence. Needless to say, other powers with the Myriad Kingdom Alliance wouldn't have as much. Forget it, I should head to the Yin-Yang Lake first. Based on what Pavilion Master Kang said, the area is rich in spiritual energy, making it extremely apt for one's cultivation. Perhaps, I might be able to raise my cultivation even without using spirit stones. Zhongxian thought. Since it was a precious ground that enhanced one's rate of cultivation, perhaps he would be able to raise his cultivation even without using spirit stones. But before that, I should try to obtain the Transcendent Mortal 3-Dan Cultivation Manual of Heaven's Path Divine Art first. Only with a cultivation technique could he raise his cultivation to higher heights. It would be a tragedy if the conditions there turned to be really beneficial to his cultivation, but he didn't have the required cultivation technique to raise his cultivation. There are many of such cultivation techniques in the Master Teacher Pavilion. As a 4-star Master Teacher, I have the qualifications to browse through them now. In terms of quantity of cultivation technique manuals and battle technique manuals, there was nowhere that could surpass the Master Teacher Pavilion's library. In any case, Zhongxian was already a 4-star Master Teacher, so he had the qualifications to browse through all of the books. Since he had time now, he decided to head over to take a look. Thinking so, he stood up and walked out. Chapter 547, Ruo Huan on the verge of crying right after Zhongxian left, Song Chao and Elder Hu arrived at the residence. After waiting for several hours, they could only leave regretfully. Right when the duo was waiting, Zhongxian arrived at the Master Teacher Pavilion's library. As the center of the entire alliance, Myriad Kingdom City was both an economic powerhouse and a martial arts hub. Secret manuals were something that was never and would never be in short supply here. Upon entering the library, Zhongxian immediately saw rows and rows of bookshelves extending beyond the limit of his sight. In terms of quantity, even the humongous library he had visited in Honghai City was far from a match with this. With so many books, I won't be able to duplicate all of them without several days of effort even if I were to go full throttle. Zhongxian contemplated. Given that he was heading to the Yin-Yang Lake with Pavilion Master Kang the next day, even if he were to give it his all, it was clearly impractical for him to duplicate everything in his library of Heaven's Path within the limited time he had. Forget it. I should just focus on cultivation techniques for now. Knowing the impossibility of the matter, he decided to focus on the bookshelves relating to cultivation techniques and battle techniques. As a 4-star master teacher, he had access to all of the resources in the Master Teacher Pavilion. Soon, he found the area where transcendent mortal 3-dan cultivation techniques were placed. With just a glance, Zhongxian could tell there was more than 1,000 books here. Flaws. Muttering beneath his breath, he placed his finger on the first book and started collecting the books. Compile. Soon, a complete transcendent mortal 3-dan Heaven's Path divine art appeared before Zhongxian's eyes. Without sufficient spirit stones, he was still unable to cultivate it at the moment. Thus, he proceeded forward, hoping to find transcendent mortal 4-dan cultivation technique manuals. But after looking around, he couldn't help but shake his head. There were indeed transcendent mortal 4-dan cultivation technique manuals here, but there were only 100 books or so. He was still a long way from compiling a complete Heaven's Path divine art. But considering that the strongest expert in Myriad Kingdom Alliance was only at transcendent mortal 4-dan, such books were likely to be carefully hoarded by the various powers in the Alliance. As such, it was already rather impressive that the Master Teacher Pavilion had 100 of such books. Now to see whether there are any books on soul here. Even so, Zhongxian didn't wallow in his disappointment. He quickly moved on to look for soul secret manuals. Having received Mo Huanxing's inheritance, Zhongxian had learned the cultivation technique of soul oracles. However, as there were flaws in the manuals from Transcendent Mortal 3-dan and onward, he only cultivated his soul until Transcendent Mortal 2-dan. Since there were all kinds of books here, there just might be some manual on souls that might be useful to him here. If he were to compile it along with his existing knowledge, he just might be able to form higher-level Heaven's Path soul art. The rise in the cultivation of a soul also boosted his strength as well. Zhongxian looked around as he walked between the shelves, and a long period of time later, he finally stopped. Ways of strengthening your soul, what you have to know about consonant spirit realm, how to cultivate your soul in clarifying turbidity realm. These are notes from master teachers of previous generations. Zhongxian's hands brushed across the books. The soul oracle inheritance had been terminated, so it was impossible to find their cultivation techniques anywhere. However, many experts had left behind notes regarding the tempering of one's soul, as it was a fundamental condition for reaching consonant spirit realm. Even though the noted had little to do with soul oracles, they detailed the profound secret of souls. As such, they could be used to fill up the gaps in the soul oracle's cultivation techniques. Thus, Zhongxian began collecting all of these books, and around 11 hours later, he finally managed to collect several thousand of books on the introduction and tempering of souls. Having overexerted himself in the process, Zhongxian's body felt heavy and he was on the verge of sleeping already. Even so, his eyes were glowing in excitement. Compile. After conditioning his state for a moment, he immersed his consciousness into the library of Heaven's Path and fused the knowledge in the books along with the inheritance of the soul oracles. I have the Heaven's Path soul art for both Transcendent Mortal 3-dan and 4-dan. After double-checking the results, Zhongxian's eyes glowed in agitation. He was only giving it a try since there was no better method he could think of. In truth, he hadn't thought it was likely to succeed. Yet, the effects exceeded his expectations. He had managed to complete the Transcendent Mortal 3-dan and 4-dan of Heaven's Path soul art in a single go. In other words, as long as he had sufficient middle-tier spirit stones, his soul cultivation could easily reach Transcendent Mortal 4-dan. Not bad. Zhongxian's lips curled up into a smile. Even though it was a disappointment that he couldn't compile the perfect Transcendent Mortal 4-dan Heaven's Path divine art, the results weren't too bad since he'd managed to complete Transcendent Mortal 3-dan and 4-dan of the Heaven's Path soul art. To think that a night has already passed. Unknowingly, while looking for the cultivation technique manuals, a night had already passed. Walking out of the library, the sun was already high up in the sky, glaring down at him. Zhongshe, you're finally out. The pavilion master is waiting for you at the backyard. An apprentice walked up to inform Zhongxian. Yuan. Zhongxian nodded his head before walking over to the backyard. It seemed like Pavilion Master Kang and Ruohuan Gongzi had already been waiting for him already. All right, let's head off. Seeing Zhongxian walking over, Pavilion Master Kang raised his hand and a massive beast slowly landed on the ground. It was a transcendent mortal 4-dan pinnacle aerial spirit beast. Most probably, it was the private of Pavilion Master Kang or the Master Teacher Pavilion. Ah, hold on for a moment. I would like to bring a student along with me, Zhong Xian said. A student? Pavilion Master Kang frowned. The Origin Flame Glacier Plane isn't under the jurisdiction of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. It's an independent power, and I had to pay a heavy price before I could obtain these 2 slots for you too. If he could bring people to the Origin Flame Glacier Plane freely, he would have surely brought Fu Xiaochen and the others over long ago. There would be no need for him to waste time on a selection beforehand, cutting it so close for the Master Teacher Tournament. It was due to the limit that he'd had to go through so much trouble. Only 2 slots. It's impossible to add another person in? Zhong Xian frowned. That won't do. In fact, the 2 slots are not guaranteed. You all have to undergo the tests of the Origin Flame Glacier Plane first. If it was that easy to negotiate with the Origin Flame Glacier Plane, the Master Teachers of our Master Teacher Pavilion would be much stronger than they are now. At the very least, we wouldn't be ranking at the bottom in nearly every tournament. Pavilion Master Kang smiled bitterly. If that's the case, I'll pass on my opportunity to my student then, Zhong Xian said. As long as he had sufficient middle-tier spirit stones, it didn't make a difference to him whether he entered the Yin-Yang Lake or not. Since there were only 2 slots, he would rather pass the chance on to Zhao Ya. After all, this was a rare opportunity for her to further awaken her unique constitution. This won't do. Your Myriad Kingdom Alliance's greatest hope in the Master Teacher Tournament, how can you pass on such an opportunity? Upon hearing the decision Zhong Xian made, Pavilion Master Kang quickly refuted his words. Are you joking? I'm still waiting for you to break the records in the Master Teacher Tournament. If you don't go to the Yin-Yang Lake, wouldn't the heavy price I paid for this opportunity go to waste? My student has to come along, Zhong Xian said resolutely. How about this? If the other party make things difficult for you, I can negotiate with him on your behalf. This. Pavilion Master Kang shook his head. You're underestimating the men of the Origin Flame Glacier Plane. If it's that easy to negotiate with them, I would have surely tried to obtain more slots. But actually, they aren't to be blamed for this. There's a fundamental limit to the number of the people who can enter the Yin-Yang Lake every time it opens. It isn't even enough for their own use, let alone outsiders like us. Zhong Xian nodded in agreement. Having read many books, he knew that many of such natural blessed lands had a fundamental limit to them. If too many people were to cultivate on such lands, it was very easy for the place to dry up. As such, a limit was imposed in view of its long-term sustainability. Forget it, you should bring your student along with you for now, I'll negotiate with them later. We'll think of another solution if that fails. Seeing the resolute attitude of the young man, Pavilion Master Kang rubbed his glabella and said, Yuan, let's give it try first. Perhaps, we might really be able to get an additional slot. Zhong Xian nodded his head. While walking there, Zhong Xian had seen many different things. He had also realized many things that others deemed to be impossible. Even if the men of the Origin Flame Glacier Plains were to be difficult, Zhong Xian was confident that he could find a flaw in the other party and exploit that to resolve the situation. Yuan. Having come to a decision, Zhong Xian sent an apprentice to call Zhao Ya over. After which, the 4 of them got onto the back of a spirit beast and flew toward Myriad Kingdom City. Yesterday, when he returned to the residence, he had entrusted the demon-sank beast with the responsibility of overlooking the safety of the others. Given its immense strength and Zhong Xian's identity as a 4-star master teacher, there shouldn't be anyone so blind as to harm his students. Not to mention, Zhao Feiwu, the princess of the alliance, was looking after them as well. Thus, there was no need for Zhong Xian to worry for the safety of Zhengyang and the others. As for the Soul Rouse grass, as it couldn't be placed in his storage ring, he didn't bring it along with him. Instead, he had Wang Ying and Sun Qiong take care of it. Given their meticulous personality, it should be in safe hands. This departure was, in truth, a secret of sorts. Even the other master teachers in the Master Teacher Pavilion didn't know about this. Otherwise, if news were to leak out and the other powers tried to hinder them, things might turn out to be disastrous. But of course, the Myriad Kingdom Alliance had always fared badly in the tournament. The other powers probably had their hands busy with tripping over the potential top 10 contenders instead. White clouds flitted past them as the spirit beast soared through the skies. The 4 of them were seated in the room on the back of the spirit beast. At this moment, Pavilion Master Kang was staring at Zhao Ya, and the perplexed expression on his face was gradually deepening. After a moment, Pavilion Master Kang couldn't help but exclaim, "Zhongshe, the physical constitution of your student doesn't seem to be ordinary." As a 4-star pinnacle master teacher, he possessed outstanding eye of discernment. Even though Zhongxian had Zhao Ya conceal the true nature of her pure yin body to avoid trouble, it still wasn't sufficient to escape from Pavilion Master Kang's sharp eyes. Pavilion Master Shaw has an incredible eye of discernment. Zhao Ya possesses the pure yin body. That's why I wish to bring her along so that she could cultivate at the Yin-Yang Lake, Zhongxian admitted. Indeed. Pavilion Master Kang's breathing hastened. As the head of the Master Teacher Pavilion, he understood how fearsome such a unique constitution was. Cultivators possessing a pure yin body became insanely strong once their unique constitution was unlocked, and from the looks of it, this young lady seemed to have awakened a portion of it already. It was no wonder Zhongshe insisted on bringing the latter to the Yin-Yang Lake, even offering to give up this opportunity to her. For the future of such a talented student, the sacrifice was indeed worthy. The pure yin body is one of the rare innate unique constitutions. Once it awakens entirely, one's body would become completely flawless. With such a constitution, one's rate of cultivation would reach an insane speed. Pavilion Master Kang recited the unique properties of the pure yin body, and the more he spoke, the brighter his eyes glowed. A moment later, he couldn't hold it back anymore. Turning around to look at Ruohuan Gongzi, he said, "All right, I've decided. Ruohuan, you shall pass your slot on to her." Ah! Ruohuan Gongzi's body swayed, and his eyes widened in shock. "Talk all you want, but why did you have to involve me in this? It wasn't easy for me to get this slot. Do you know how hard I worked? Upon hearing that I was going to the Yin-Yang Lake yesterday, I spent the entire day preparing everything I would need. And yet, due to him bringing along his student, you're going to deprive me of my slot." "Teacher." Ruohuan Gongzi immediately looked at his teacher with a panicked expression. "Say no more, this matter is decided. Don't worry, I will definitely make it up to you for this." Pavilion Master Kang waved his hands to signify that this matter wasn't up for debate. Zhongshe was the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's greatest hope in the Master Teacher Tournament, so he had to raise his cultivation as fast as possible. Without sufficient strength, he would be at a disadvantage for many of the tests. On the other hand, his student possessed the pure yin body, so the opportunity at Yin-Yang Lake was incomparably important to her. After pondering over the matter, the only option was to abandon his own student. Ruohuan Gongzi burst into tears. Chapter 548, Origin Flame Glacier Plain. Ignoring the crying Ruohuan Gongzi, Zhongshen asked, "Who are those Origin Flame Glacier Plain men you spoke of?" It wasn't that he was without sympathy, but that he thought there was definitely a chance at turning the situation around here. Besides, even if they were to end up being stuck with only 2 slots, Zhongshen could simply compensate the other party by providing some pointers to his cultivation. In any case, Zhongshen's guidance would definitely be much more effective than training in that Yin-Yang Lake. Origin Flame Glacier Plain is the name of an extremely powerful influence. Just like the Apothecary Guild and Blacksmith Guild, they wield a sizable number of spirit veins and blessed lands. As such, even though I am the head of the Master Teacher Pavilion, I dare not offend them easily. Thus, the most I could do was propose a fair trade with them, Pavilion Master Kang explained. Spirit veins and blessed lands. Zhongshen was astonished. Just this in itself was sufficient to show that the power was anything but ordinary. After all, given the innumerable formidable powers in the world, how could they possibly allow a small fry hog onto such precious resources? Indeed. Every branch of the Origin Flame Glacier Plane has a court chief, and I happen to be acquainted with the current generation of court chief. That was how I managed to obtain the 2 slots to undergo the trial. Honestly speaking, it'll rely heavily on your abilities whether you can enter or not later on, Pavilion Master Kang said. Acquainted. Yuan, she was once injured, and I saved her. Stroking his beard, Pavilion Master Kang said, do you remember the case study on the person who cultivated the great ancient incursion art, the one whose chest was wounded by searing sword qi? Oh. Zhongxian nodded his head. When he first met Pavilion Master Kang, the latter had once posed a test to him. The test was based on a real-life case study of a severely wounded cultivator attempting to achieve a breakthrough to transcendent mortal realm. That situation was extremely complex, and given the difficulty in the level of treatment, it was natural that Pavilion Master Kang would win the other party's gratitude after the matter. After chatting a while longer, Zhongxian gained a deeper understanding of the Origin Flame Glacier Plane. This power controlled a significant portion of blessed lands all over the world, and one thing that they didn't lack was resources. As such, wealth meant nothing much to them. Only a master teacher could possibly make them willingly fork out 2 slots. After chatting for a while longer, the group started on their cultivation. Due to a lack of spirit stones, Zhongxian didn't focus on attempting breakthroughs in his cultivation. Instead, he spent his time reinforcing his cultivation and enhancing his maximum zhenqi capacity. After his cultivation reached Origin Energy Realm Advanced stage, his strength had increased tremendously once more. His strength of 200,000 ding had increased by 2-fold to 400,000 ding. A normal Origin Energy Realm primary stage expert would only wield a might of 150,000 ding, intermediate stage 200,000 ding, advanced stage 250,000 ding, and pinnacle 300,000 ding. On the other hand, Yin-Yang Realm was divided by a difference of 100,000 ding between each tier: primary stage 500,000 ding, intermediate stage 600,000 ding, advanced stage 700,000 ding, pinnacle 800,000 ding. Despite being only at Origin Energy Realm Advanced stage, Zhongxian already wielded power much greater than that of an Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle cultivator. If he were to complement it with his Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan Pinnacle Soul cultivation, his total might would exceed 700,000 ding. With such strength, he would be able to stand toe-to-toe with even Yin-Yang Realm Advanced stage cultivators. But of course, this was all just theory. Strength wasn't the determining factor of one's fighting prowess. More important than that was one's battle instinct and abilities. If it was that easy to challenge those of higher cultivation realms, master teachers would truly be too overpowered. But even so, a Yin-Yang Realm intermediate stage expert should still be a piece of cake. Along with Zhongxian's rise in strength, his reaction speed and physical prowess had improved significantly. While the change wasn't as obvious as that when he first stepped into Transcendent Mortal Realm, there was still a clear growth in his overall fighting prowess. It just happens that I still have some time. I should study Heaven's Path Sword Art, Heaven's Path Spear Art, and Heaven's Path Saber Art once more. Reinforcing his cultivation had increased his zhenqi capacity significantly. Pleased with the results, Zhongxian decided to turn his attention to battle techniques instead. The current level of Heaven's Path Sword Art and Heaven's Path Movement Art was mainly compiled from the books in Tianxian Kingdom. Even though he had augmented it several times with more books, the current Heaven's Path Sword Art was already insufficient to meet his requirements. Thus, he had to reorganize everything and compile even stronger moves. Along his way here, Zhongxian had gathered quite a few battle techniques, not to mention, he even collected all of the battle technique books from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. As such, all he had to do was to reorganize the books for compilation. Thus, he first worked on Heaven's Path Sword Art. Sword is the emperor of all weapons. There was nearly no cultivator who would be ignorant of swordsmanship. As such, there were innumerable secret manuals on swordsmanship, thus making it convenient to find them. Not too long later, Zhongxian managed to reorganize the entire set of Heaven's Path Sword Art. Due to the narrow space on the back of the beast, Zhongxian was unable to execute it. Thus, he simply played out the skill in his head. It didn't take him too long to master the technique. After that, he turned his attention to saber art, spear art, fist art, leg art, and movement art. With the enhanced Heaven's Path battle techniques, Zhongxian's fighting prowess rose tremendously. If Zhongxian could only match up to an Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle cultivator with just his Zhenqi cultivation only previously, at this moment, he could easily match up to a Yin-Yang Realm Primary Stage cultivator. Factoring in his soul cultivation as well, probably even a transcendent mortal 3-Dan Yin-Yang Realm Advanced Stage cultivator could be easily destroyed by him. But of course, his greatest trump card at the moment wasn't his battle techniques, it was the Eye of Insight and Impartation of Heaven's Will. The former allowed him to see through flaws, whereas the latter allowed him to beguile the minds of others. With these two trump cards, he could beguile even Pavilion Master Kang easily. While Zhongxian was cultivating, Zhao Wei had been working hard too. After the last few days of hard work, she finally surpassed the bottleneck of Zhizuan realm and advanced into the half-transcension realm. In just a short few months, she'd advanced from a fighter 1-Dan to such a realm. This rate of progress was sufficient to leave innumerable people dumbfounded. Sometime later, while Zhongxian was in the midst of cultivating, Pavilion Master Kang announced, "The Yin-Yang Lake is just right ahead." Hearing those words, Zhongxian calmed his cultivation and stood up. Through the windows, he saw a towering mountain not too far away. Amidst the peak piled with a thick layer of white snow, a conspicuous dark green court stood. This is the Glacier Plain Court. The Yin-Yang Lake is inside the court. Pavilion Master Kang pointed. Taking a closer look, one could see a plaque on the entrance of the court, and the 3 words Glacier Plain Court was exceptionally eye-catching. Silent but dignified. Standing by the window, Pavilion Master Kang stared at the snowing mountain peak not too far away as he said, "Just by looking at the thick layer of snow here, you probably can't imagine that this place used to be a volcano before the Glacier Plain Court was built. Back then, the searing heat was so unbearable that even a transcendent mortal cultivator would suffer grievous burns if he attempted to cross the volcano." Volcano? Not only was Zhongxian stunned, even Ruo Huangongzi seemed to be bewildered by those words. This towering mountain was completely cloaked in white snow. Just the sight was enough to leave one shuddering in coldness. How could such a place have been a volcano before that? Honestly speaking, when I first heard of this news, I shared your reactions as well. Seeing through everyone's bewilderment, Pavilion Master Kang shook his head. This is strength of the Origin Flame Glacier Plain. Not only do they possess the strength to claim blessed lands, they are also capable of changing the geomancy of a land to nurture the blessed land. Under their hands, many treacherous environments had turned into a spiritual energy haven that many looked forward to. Zhongxian couldn't help but ask, could it be that the men of Origin Flame Glacier Plain could be considered to be of a unique occupation? To be capable of turning the unusable into a treasure, converting a feared volcano into a snow mountain, unless it was a unique occupation, Zhongxian found it hard to imagine that there was any power capable of such a formidable feat. Your way of putting it can't be said to be wrong, but it isn't entirely correct either. Seeing the confused looks on everyone's faces, Pavilion Master Kang chuckled. Whether a certain heritage is considered as a unique occupation or not is decided by the Master Teacher Pavilion. One of the factors the Master Teacher Pavilion uses for making such decision is whether the heritage has a complete system of knowledge and a strict progressive ability ranking system. But there are simply some occupations whose members are unable to be judged under a hierarchical structure, such as herbologists. The capability of a herbologist depends heavily on their knowledge. Often, medicinal herbs required very specific knowledge to cultivate them, and it was possible for a highly skilled herbologist to be unable to cultivate a basic medicinal herb. Thus, a progressive ability ranking system couldn't really work in this case. An occupation without a strict progressive ranking system cannot be considered as a unique occupation. While it is true that the men of Origin Flame Glacier Plain possess mysterious means to turn a volcano into a snow mountain, a marsh into a plain, but they had no true heritage or a specific way of doing so. Rather, their abilities seem to be more closely related to their talent and ability. Besides, there are very few members of the Origin Flame Glacier Plain alive in the world. Even in the area of jurisdiction of Myriad Kingdom Alliance or even the entire Huanyu Empire, there is only one of such branch. Given such, how could it possibly be proclaimed as an occupation? But at the same time, they did indeed possess a unique ability, a characteristic that only occupations have. Thus, even the master-teacher pavilion was a little troubled and was unable to come to a verdict over this matter. Zhongxian nodded his head. An occupation must have a unique heritage that everyone could take on, and it must have a lot of branches across the world. But the Origin Flame Glacier Plain men were sorely lacking in their number of members, and their heritage was slightly chaotic. Not to mention, their ability relied heavily on their innate talent as well. As such, they had yet to be proclaimed as an occupation. To turn a searing volcano into a frigid snow mountain, how did they do it? Zhao Ya asked curiously. I'm not sure about the details, but it is certain that this place was a volcano 1,000 years ago. It was said that the men of Origin Flame Glacier Plain traveled here and reshaped this place over the course of a century to turn it into its current state. On top of that, they even created the yin-yang lake where the power of yin and yang amalgamate with one another, creating a paradoxical combination of clarity and turbidity. It is said that any cultivator that has yet to reach Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan will benefit greatly from cultivating in it. Pavilion Master Kang shook his head. However, the slots for the yin-yang lake are very limited every year. It is insufficient for even their internal consumption, let alone to offer it to outsiders. Throughout the years, there were many influential powers who approached them, only to leave in disappointment. The ability to reshape the environment was a secret of the Origin Flame Glacier Plain men. Even as a powerful 4-star master teacher, he had no access to such secrets. Perhaps, it might be a powerful formation created via the terrain such as the mountain pulse and such. Ruohuan Gongzi interjected. One common method used to change one's environment was via formations. Thus, Ruohuan Gongzi immediately thought of the use of formation. It isn't a formation. The mountain range extends for several hundred kilometers. How huge of a formation would be required to encompass the area? Not to mention, the spiritual energy required to sustain its activation over so many years. Pavilion Master Kang said. Even though formations had the power to alter an environment, its area of effect tended to be limited. While it was theoretically possible to create a formation that extended over several hundred kilometers and modify an entire mountain, it was nearly completely unfeasible to implement it. Even a transcendent mortal 9 Dan expert would be unable to accomplish such a task. Perhaps, only the legendary beings surpassing the 9 Dans would be capable of doing so. Indeed, it's not a formation. Zhongxian shook his head too. When Pavilion Master Kang raised the topic earlier, Zhongxian used the Eye of Insight to look into the matter as well. There wasn't the slightest trace of a formation across the entire mountain range, so that definitely wasn't the case. Otherwise, given his eye of discernment, it was impossible for him to see through something so basic. Chuckling, Pavilion Master Kang interjected the conversation and said, "Forget it, let's not bother about that anymore. Our motive here is to enter the yin-yang lake, not to deduce its origin. Later on, when we're in, do not act on your own whim. Follow my lead. I'll try to vie for 3 slots, and even if that fails, we have to try to secure our 2 slots at the very least." UN. Everyone nodded. Good, let's descend then. Hearing the voice, the aerial spirit beast flapped its wings and began gliding toward the glacier plain court. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,